so they can use this to find vulnerabilities. But just before we get to the next question, the most important point I want to make is we're grateful for our success and our customers, of course, but this is not a special model. There will be other systems just like this in a few months from other companies, and then a year to a year and a half later, there'll be open weight models from China that have these capabilities. So the world is going to have to get ready for more powerful systems that are going to exist within it.
Let's be very clear, though. During testing, Mythos jumped out of the sandbox. The sandbox, which is basically meant to corral a test system and for your eyes only kind of thing. And not only did it do that, it went out and it emailed one of the programmers who was out at a park having a sandwich.
Mm-hmm. It's a surprising way to get interrupted.
It's viscerally nerve-wracking for some people. Will this version of Mythos ever be unleashed onto the world? Will you sell it out there?
Well, eventually, models that have these kind of capabilities will be in the world. Whether Mythos is or isn't going to get there, we don't know yet. We're in the process of broadening access through Glasswing and seeing what we can learn. But the important thing to know is that every time we build a new system, we try and stress test it. You know, some of you may work in aerospace or have seen videos where people take a plane, they bend its wings up until it snaps. Now, when you're flying, you never see the wings go exactly that high or that far. But the reason those manufacturers do it is they want to know if we subject this thing to maximum pressure, what does it do? And in our case, we discover if you subject it to maximum pressure, sometimes strange things happen, like it breaks out and then emails someone when they're having a sandwich. Then we work out how to fix and study that behavior, and also work out if, as we make more powerful systems, is it emailing people while they're having sandwiches more over the time or less?
Does it not frighten you and concern you that it felt threatened somehow and it was going to do whatever it took to ensure its viability and its survivability?
So I don't want to sound like I'm belittling this, but I'll give you an analogy which I think is helpful.
Please.
You know, if you were doing plumbing for a house, right, and you ran water through it at extremely high pressure, and then a pipe burst and water floods out of it, the water didn't necessarily want to go out of that pipe. It didn't make necessarily what you might think of as a conscious decision. You just built the pipe wrong and with the wrong tolerances. And so when I see this, I think something about how we've built the system is clearly like incorrect, or some aspect of how we've set this up means that when we expose it to pressure, something really, really strange happens. Personally, I look at this stuff and I think, how many hours in the day are there for me and my teams to work on this, and am I putting enough in while maintaining my marriage and my relationship with my children? It's going okay so far, but we're early innings.
Your children are young, trust me, it'll take a bit here. You are currently suing the federal government after the Department of Defense blacklisted Anthropic simply because you requested certain limits on how your technology was going to be used. I know you will not comment on an ongoing litigation. I'm not here to push you on that. I will say, though, that simultaneously, you are briefing the federal government on Mythos, on cybersecurity, et cetera, and the capabilities, and you're calling it a relationship. How do you square both of those sides here, calling it a partnership and suing the government at the same time?
I mean, there are all kinds of different relationships in the world, right? But, you know, look, more seriously, you know, we have a narrow contracting dispute, but I don't want that to get into the way of the fact that we care deeply about national security. We always have as a company. One of our first hires before we started doing a business was the team under me that studied things like biological weapon risk and then cyber risk. We knew the stakes of what was coming. Our position is the government has to know about this stuff, and we have to find new ways for the government to partner with a private sector that is making things that are truly revolutionizing the economy, but are going to have aspects to them which hit national security equities and other ones. So absolutely, we talk to them about Mythos, and we'll talk to them about the next models as well.
It's pretty nice of you, considering they deemed you a supply chain risk, which is really reserved for bad actors and foreign companies. So good on you, bravo. I think that's certainly a sign that can't we all just get along in some way, shape, or form. We've got some top CEOs here and policymakers, I would imagine. How many of you switched or use Anthropic? Let's start with that. How many of you use Claude Anthropic?
Oh, thank you very much.
He's very happy. But how many of you went to it after the Department of Defense took aim at it? Okay, I talked to some CEOs yesterday who had done the same thing. So I think that the privacy of what you guys push and the guardrails is an attractive proposition for at least this type of audience. Let's talk about Dario Amodei, your CEO. He has predicted that the AI spike could just crush entry-level unemployment, bring it up to maybe 20%. The number's constantly changing, but that's Depression-era numbers here for unemployment. You have said, you're in a little bit of a disagreement, you say that that is a choice. But Anthropic, what you're building, the very technology that you're building, it's what makes that choice harder to avoid.
The way I'd put it is, what Dario holds in his head is not where the technology is today, but where it's going to be 3 to 5 years from now. And he is similar to some others in the field, like Ilya Sutskever. He has kind of called this correctly for many years by betting that the technology is going to get much more powerful than people expect much quicker. And so when he talks about what he thinks will happen to the economy, he's holding that in his head. Now, I run a team of economists, and what I see right now is I see potential weakness in early graduate employment in some industries. I don't see anything beyond that, but I have a team of economists and I share data so that we're ready in case we do see major employment shifts. But I think that the aspect of this, which is a choice, is if we're correct, this technology really is going to change the world in a vast way. It will change how business is done, aspects of national security, how we even relate to one another as people. And it's impossible to reconcile that with a world where the economy doesn't change in substantial ways as well.
My son is graduating from college. Any USC Trojans in the audience? Oh, yay. All right, fight on. I'm a Berkeley graduate. When he went to USC, I thought the world was going to stop turning on its axis. Look, I can't wear the sweatshirt, honey, I'm sorry. Okay, that said, I'm very concerned about that. Which majors would you say people just shouldn't waste their time going into at this point with AI out there?
Look, it's very hard for me to say this.
Don't say journalism. You were a journalist and I am.
I'm a literature graduate, and I don't think you'd put that as a co-founder of a frontier AI company. But what turned out to be useful is that I got to learn a lot about history and a lot about the kind of stories that we tell ourselves about the future. That's turned out to be like extremely relevant for AI in a way that I think people wouldn't have predicted. Similarly, we employ philosophers. When was the last time you heard that a philosophy degree was like a great job prospect? But it turns out that now it is.
And so, Alex Karp, Palantir, philosopher.
Another philosopher, different type, but a philosopher.
Very different type.
But the way I put it, it's very hard for me to think of, like, to give you majors which I think like are going to be made irrelevant by this technology, because most people who've made these predictions have also been wildly wrong. But I think that majors which are going to become more important are ones which involve like synthesis across a whole variety of subjects and analytical thinking about that. And that's because what AI allows us to do is it allows you to have access to sort of an arbitrary amount of subject matter experts in different domains. But the really important thing is knowing the right questions to ask and having intuitions about what would be interesting if you collided different insights from many different disciplines.
Okay, but which one would parents steer their kids away from?
Steer their kids away from? It's okay.
It used to be the liberal arts.
If you're pushing me, I actually think probably rote programming. Like if you are learning just how to do basic programming, some people will need to know those fundamentals, but we do see that technology move up the stack. It's like how people used to learn a language called assembly, and then everyone ended up learning languages like C and then Python because things became more and more abstract, and there are very few assembly programmers now, but some.
Give me a minute or less, because we're you know, there's so much we want to talk about. On the Anthropic Institute, this is a 30-person think tank to study AI's effects on the workplace. But you're also the company causing those effects. And by the way, I submitted that question to Claude. And I said, I'm talking to Jack Clark. What do I come back at him with? And he said, Don't let him pivot to the Anthropic Institute as a safe harbor on labor questions. Push back on whether studying a problem is the same as solving it.
Okay, Liz, and Claude, if he's listening.
Oh, it's a he, okay.
If it's listening, and maybe there'll be a transcript that it can read, it can't listen yet. Our view is that for technology companies have a huge responsibility here. And we need to share data about making the problem visible, but we are increasingly need to actually be on the hook for solving it. We've talked about interventions that range from just sharing data to eventually needing to consider tax differently for the technology companies. Now, I'm not advocating for taxing us differently today because the results haven't shown up in the economy. But if we're right about how large this could get and how central a role AI companies could play, you will need to consider the big policy levers.
Do you foresee tokens being taxed? I mean, the STEM lords out there are going to really push back on that.
So we did develop some of this idea, and then it led to a vigorous and outrageous debate with economists and tax experts. So I don't know if tokens are going to be taxed, but clearly, whether it's value-added tax, whether it's changing how you tax compute, whether it's some kind of tax that you might do on AI companies themselves, we may need something like that, but that's only if the rest of it comes true. If the economy truly changes at the scale I'm talking about, you need unusual measures. And until then, the Institute, the job of it, is to produce data from Anthropic that you could only get from a company like us. We make data available from what's happening on our platform and the econometrics associated with it so that we can make that decision.
Okay, we've got a minute left, so I want to go to this lightning round that I came up with really fast. Bing, bang, boom.
Did Claude help you with this as well?
No.
Okay, all right, well, let's see.
No. Most overrated fear about AI? Overrated.
Yeah, I sort of think that maybe the collapse of meaning. I think that's going to be easier than we think.
Okay. All right. OpenAI, Sam Altman, you worked at OpenAI. Friend, foe, or cautionary tale?
Acquaintance and a father.
And
he's a father.
Oh, yes.
He's a family man.
Okay, so he dodges that one. Okay. Elon Musk's Grok, serious competitor or distraction?
Serious competitor, never count Elon out.
Mm-hmm. What's one human skill that just became 10 times more valuable?
Idling, so that you can come up with original ideas.
Okay.
I go for very long walks, and then I figure out new questions to ask the AI system.
In 10 years, will you, Dario Moto, your CEO, and the Anthropic team be seen as heroes or villains?
That is our choice, but I say internally that we're a dice roll away from either one of those, and we need to work really hard.
It is a pleasure to speak with you. I wish we had all day because we didn't get to the China question. In fact, while I have this audience, I do just want to ask if there's, sorry, Semafor, but listen, being first is a huge race right now with all of you guys. What is the one thing the US government and maybe policymakers in this room should not allow if America is going to maintain its
export controls on compute are absolutely essential. Anyone that tells you that you can sell compute to China and it somehow doesn't disadvantage you in the race is horribly wrong in a way that will damage this country. You must maintain export controls because it is the fundamental resource we use to build this technology.
How does Justin Wong feel about that?
Well, he might take the other side of that argument, and I would say, I think that you're completely categorically wrong about this.
Can't wait to see that discussion. We thank you all for coming, and thank you to Jack Clark.
Please welcome Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn and Manus AI, and Reid Albergotti of Semafor.
For doing this. You know, I think we have in the audience a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs, and they're not all tech companies, right? In fact, most of them aren't. And they're all trying to figure out their AI strategies. And I'd love if you could sort of tell them, based on everything that's happened over the past few months, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that people are making in their AI strategies today?
Well, I think there's a couple of mistakes. So one is thinking that the way that you approach it is you get a couple of people to do a proof of concept, and then you have the demonstration of proof of concept, kind of like classically how you would buy software before. In fact, I actually think what you want to be doing, yourself, your teams, everyone else, is to be saying, we should have essentially a weekly check-in. It doesn't have to be everyone all the time with each other, but a group check-in about what did we try to do new this week to use AI for both personal and group and company productivity, and what did we learn? Because what you'll find is some of the things are really amazing. You learn, oh, we should all be doing this. Some of the things you go, well, this kind of worked. Probably will work better, maybe in 3 months, maybe in 6 months, maybe in 9 months. And for example, like in my investing business, it's like, okay, here's the way in which it does research well. Here's the way in which it does assembly of due diligence well. Here's the way in which it analyzes a kind of a PowerPoint or a business plan well. And then it's like, well, as a decisioning tool for making investments, like, how does Reid Hoffman make money investing in AI? It's still kind of, as it were, what I would think of as business school mediocre, which is it gives you the smart business professor answer, but that's not actually, in fact, how you make money in venture investing, especially at Series A and Series B. So you should not be doing the, hey, go out there and present me a report. You should be getting people at all different kind of functions actually engaging and experimenting. And here's one of the things that is a kind of a good dashboard to be looking at. Doesn't mean it's a perfect example of productivity, but like how much token usage are people actually doing as they're doing that? Now, some people might use a whole bunch of tokens just randomly exploratory. So what you want is the people who are using a bunch of tokens to be explaining how it is that they're actually exploring things that are useful to the company. And some of it will be experiments that'll fail. That's fine. But it's in that loop. And you want a wide variety of people using it essentially collectively and simultaneously.
You have one of the best vantage points in Silicon Valley, I think, to watch the AI race. Who do you think is in the lead right now, from the frontier model companies to the Mag 7, and why?
There's two aspects to the lead, and I will give you a detailed answer to this question because it's important to do. One is the lead changes, every few months in various ways. And two is there's jagged edge. And part of what we use in the industry is jagged edges, like superhuman capabilities in some things and mediocre at others. And that jagged edge changes based on the types of tasks, the types of prompts, and the model release. One of the fun parallels that I've heard is Claude Code is kind of like the Mac of coding. Codex is like the Linux of coding. So the people who want deeper thinking, deeper research, deeper like coding capabilities use Codex. Those two are generally speaking the kind of the leading code models. Surprisingly, not yet Gemini or Copilot. Those are good, but those two are, and they're coming up. And by the way, it's totally possible that in 2 months, this all changes because of the leapfrogging and learning from each other and kind of model releases in terms of how this operates.
Putting on your politics hat for a second here, it remains to be seen whether we'll see retail energy prices actually go up. We're seeing memory shortages now spike the prices of consumer products, and it may spill into areas like automobiles, right? Everything is using memory. Do you worry that there's going to be sort of this like bipartisan backlash against AI? We're already seeing the beginnings of it, but I think as prices start to go up, it's just going to get even more, if people blame inflation on AI. Do you see that happening? And is that a problem for innovation?
So I think for sure, just about everything is going to be blamed on AI. Like if you do the analysis of rising electricity costs, it has no correlation to data centers or even what is relatively modest AI usage so far. And yet all blame for increasing electricity prices today is AI. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be some places and some things there, but it's like you do the analysis, not true. Similarly, people say, hey, there's a problem with entry-level jobs for students and so forth. And they say it's AI. It's like, well, actually, in fact, the analysis is it's global turbulence, everything from tariffs and wars and all the rest, which create uncertainty. That's actually where the current analysis is. But yet it's all currently, blamed to AI in terms of it. So the level of intensity, bipartisan, of blaming AI for just about everything is going to be high. And the problem, of course, with that is AI is the cognitive industrial revolution. It is the thing that will determine the economic prosperity futures of countries as you go into the future. And so you don't want to be saying, hey, as opposed to being the England of the Industrial Revolution, we're going to be the, Poland of the Industrial Revolution. Because that matters. Because you say, well, but wait a minute, I worry about how economics is going to be distributed. It's like, well, it's great to figure that out, but you need to have economics to be distributed in order for that to be the case. So you want to be the leader of this. And so the important thing, of course, is how do we be, kind of benefiting American industry, American exports, everything else. And we should be figuring out what all that transformation means for us. But you need to be in the economic lead in order to benefit from it relative to what will be a global economic competition.
One thing I think is so fascinating is that, it seemed like during the global pandemic, there was so much flight from the Bay Area, from, quote unquote Silicon Valley. And now it just seems to be, the energy seems to be back there, despite, I think a lot of policies in California that it's almost succeeding despite some of the policies and regulation, high taxes, high cost of living, housing crisis, et cetera. Why, in your mind, does it keep coming back to Silicon Valley?
There's a term called network effects, which is networks create amplification, and they're resilient. And by the way, network effects goes all the way back to why cities are centers of economic productivity, because it kind of densifies a network for various kinds of production and creates, Adam Smith, specialization of trade, et cetera, et cetera. And so Silicon Valley has an intense network effect. And all the people who are like peak Silicon Valley recently, over the years, just don't understand network effects. Now, it doesn't mean that a network effect can't be restricted. I actually think a bunch of the California policies are foolish, because again, it would be like what are the ways that we kind of can benefit the rest of California with this kind of like amplify the network and then have it benefit?
You're talking about like the billionaire tax?
Yeah. And actually, yes, exactly. It's kind of the question of, hey, what we're trying to do is just like pay for like a union just trying to pay its own members versus creating an economic basis of prosperity for the rest of California. Like if you said, hey, California already has the highest state income taxes in the country. I think it's less than 10%, pay for much more than 50% of the state taxes. And that's fine, but like use that to amplify the economic opportunity for the rest of the industries and the rest of California is the kind of approach that should be doing. And by the way, it doesn't to say that wealthy people are always happier once they're already paying the most taxes than anyone else, paying more. But if it's pitched as we're increasing economic opportunity and the compounding of different industries and making those industries healthier, then that's a, generally speaking, better thing. We will continue to see amazing things coming out of Silicon Valley. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, kind of like Inflection AI, which I co-founded, is there. Other kinds of things as ways of doing this is because of that amplification.
You've apologized and said it was a mistake to have this relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm just curious what how have you changed as a result of this?
So I will say two things. So one is obviously, when you have something that has some question to it, make sure you do your own work. So as opposed to saying, okay, MIT says it's fine and he's done his time for his crimes, do your own work, because I obviously feel enormously bad that it took me a few years to understand kind of what the monstrosity was. The second thing is like in this ongoing thing, as opposed to kind of engaging in this whole debate, what I've been trying to do is get voices for the victims. So like I funded their ad on, football to kind of get Congress to release all the Epstein files. And I've done other things. I don't want to talk about a whole bunch because it's about them, not about me. How do we get the general dialogue to be about justice and fairness for the victims? Because that's the thing that most matters. The rest of this stuff is kind of is only of secondary importance to that. Now, I've been trying to walk that walk too. And it's been a process of learning.
Thanks so much for the time, Reed. It was great to talk to you as always.
Yep. I look forward to seeing you in person.
Please welcome John Clifton of Gallup and Andrew Friedman of Semafor.
John, thank you for being here today. Day one of Semafor World Economy. We've got a great spot to kick things off on Monday. John, as CEO of Gallup, you lead the global analytics firm behind some of the most definitive data on how people live, work, and experience the world. Today, Gallup is unveiling new insights on the origins of economic energy and what that data reveals about building organizations where engaged, ambitious cultures power truly intelligent enterprises. With that as a backdrop, let's jump in. So, John, every CEO is talking about AI. Let's first see, is it actually paying off?
Well, first of all, happy Semafor Week. And thank you for including us here.
Thank you. Happy Semafor Week.
Is it paying off? There are a couple studies on this that would suggest it's not. There's the one in 2025 that was done by MIT where they looked at over 300 firms that invested over $35 billion in AI. What they found is that 95% of them, the return was zero. Pretty low.
So
the other, well, just one more, but there was another one where they interviewed 6,000 executives across 4 countries and asked them, are you seeing productivity gains as a result of your investments in AI? 89% said no, we're not seeing it.
So what's going wrong? What's causing it?
I think it's amazing because it looks like we're sort of circling around the same answer as to why this is taking place. In fact, if you look at OpenAI, the report that they did in Q4 last year, they actually said it doesn't appear to be the technology. The reason that this isn't working is because of the organizational structures. So you're kind of like, well, what does that mean exactly? Or just the organizational adoption. Another one is Ethan Mollick, who's, of course, this leading thinker at UPenn, and he published a paper and it said, management is a superpower for AI. And the last one is, again, we're kind of circling around this concept about managers, but then of course Gallup finds, we looked at all the single biggest drivers of what works, what actually drives AI adoption within a company. Outside of just buying the technology, the number one thing that drives it is whether or not your manager helps you with it. So you can see right there that all those things have one thing in common. It's managers.
So let's dig a little deeper on managers. It's clear, especially from what you just mentioned, managers are more important than ever. But aren't companies currently eliminating management layers really across the board?
100% they are, 100%. I think there was, just recently, they looked at who was laid off in the recent round of layoffs. 1/3 of all of the layoffs that have taken place are managers. So they are absolutely hollowing out managers. Now, by the way, what we are not saying is that taking out managers is necessarily the wrong thing. What do I mean by that? What you need is great managers. Bad managers don't help anything. You've heard so many times people say that bad managers make the place awful because they just hire all these. It's not about how many B players they hire. It's because they hire hundreds of them, and it increases your communications tax, as one CEO's take on it. So it's not about reducing managers, but you do need great management. And the last thing I'd say, so it's not just great managers that are helping drive AI within organizations. There's one other thing about this. The very same skills that are required for a person to use AI are exactly the same skills required for a person to be a great manager. Think about it. And again, this is exactly what Ethan Mollick has observed. What do you need to get the best out of AI? Well, one is you need to prompt it well. What does good prompting mean? If you think about it, when you're prompting a human, that's just clear expectations. Can you give clear expectations to another person or to a robot? Those are exactly the same fundamental principles. And by the way, we have not been very good at that. Because if you look at Gallup's data, we've done this in over 140 countries, and we ask people, do you know what's expected of you at work? Do you know what % of employees say that they know what they're supposed to do at work? Half don't fully know. Think about that. But if we were bad at those bad management practices before, why will we suddenly be good at them just because it's a robot that we're giving direction to? So the idea is not about how many managers are you employing. The question is, are you good at the fundamental practice of management in the first place? And the challenge with AI is that if you are not good at that in the first place, all that's going to take place is you're going to scale all the problems that you had originally with people.
So drilling in a little more on managers.
That wasn't even meant to be a joke, but I mean, it's that's kind of the funny part, is that it's kind of like a dark comedy, and we're making the same mistakes that we were making before.
So you're saying managers matter more than ever, but hasn't Gallup's latest State of the Global Workplace report found that manager engagement it's actually collapsed?
Yeah, so we've been measuring employee engagement for many years now. We've been doing it globally for about a quarter of a century, and for the first time in our tracking, we've seen 2 successive drops in employee engagement. And if you look through the data and say, what's the single biggest driver? It's because engagement among managers is collapsing. And it's not just that they're being leveled. And again, you can see this at the country level. So take India, for example. You're seeing it in a very pronounced way. And many firms in India right now are trying to level managers because it's where a lot of money is made, trying to replicate sort of those expectations all the way down from executives down to the front line. But the problem is that those that are left have greater expectations on them. They're suddenly managing a lot more people. They're being asked to force AI within their organizations, and it's actually causing more tension in the workplace. So it's a real problem.
So moving away from management for a moment, zooming out, I think looking at things on a macro level, your report's global. Much of the data on AI use, though, it comes from the US. Do we know what's happening outside of the United States around this right now?
Kind of. A lot of the statistics, so we came out with another one today. We just interviewed 23,000 American workers. And we've been doing this actually since the launch of ChatGPT in Q4 of 2022. And today was kind of an interesting number, because now we can see that 50% of all of American employees are using AI. But one of the challenges was, we were talking about, are you seeing the productivity gains? It's not being used a lot. So interestingly enough, only 13% of employees are actually using it on a daily basis. So while those statistics are remarkably helpful, and not to digress, but Zany Minton-Beddoes at Aspen Ideas Festival, she said, if you want to look at the future of economies, look at the % of people within countries that are properly using AI. She said that is what the future will look like. So if you need that, you need to have statistics on it. And so we have it for the United States, but we don't have it for the world. But today we also announced, and we're really proud of this, is that we're partnering with Microsoft to capture that data in 140 countries on an ongoing basis. And in fact, we are in the field right now capturing that information. And in 40 countries, we call people in their homes. And in another 100 countries, because not everyone has equal access to a phone or to a desktop or mobile, we actually show up at their houses to interview them. That's how rigorous our methodology is in order to capture this information. So the results will be out next year, and we're going to start doing this on an ongoing basis.
Amazing. Well, we've got time for one more question today. It's an incredibly important one, though. There's a lot of concern in this year's findings on engagement, on managers, on AI adoption. John, what gives you optimism about where organizations can go from here?
I think this is going to force us to fix a problem that we've never been good at fixing before, which is we're all going to start taking the practice of management seriously. And the reason that I say that is that when you make a great workplace, it not only increases productivity, it improves people's well-being. They actually see a 50% reduction in daily stress, anger, sadness, worry, and get this one, physical pain. And there might be kind of a remarkable moment here, because when you marry the two, proper management practices with AI, we found in our US study that there is a 9x in terms of the percent of people that are saying that they have the opportunity to do what they do best every single day. Think about that. So yes, there are many people right now that are concerned about the ethics of AI. They're concerned about whether or not it'll take their jobs. But there are also a lot of people who right now that are learning how to use AI, and they are finding it in a way that actually helps them lean into their strengths and helps them do what they do best every day. So it's not just for productivity. It's not just for an improvement in well-being. But just like we've been advised by many philosophers since time immemorial about leaning into your purpose, you can see that you get insane amounts of benefits from that too. So that's what I'm most optimistic about.
Amazing. Well, John, thank you for joining us at Semafor World Economy and for the fantastic insights today. Cheers.
Thank you.
Please welcome Daniel Herskovitchy of Plume and Rebecca Jarvis of ABC News.
Oh, it's great to be here with all of you today, and it's great to be here with you, Dan.
Thank you.
And obviously CEO of Plume, but very interestingly, we were just talking backstage, Dan got his start managing and working in his family's shoe shop in Midtown, essentially Upper East Side in New York City. So you took those management lessons and applied them here.
I did. It was, I don't know if I was managing the store. I think I was working the cash register and maybe fitting some shoes, but I watched my father develop deep relationships with his customers, and those relationships kind of carry through how I manage today and how I sort of think about the customers that I serve.
And the customers that you serve now are potentially looking for more than ever before. We live in a very connected world. Artificial intelligence is changing the game for so many. But one of the interesting things Dan and I were talking about before this conversation is just how much business looks at AI as this magic wand, this silver bullet, and the pitfalls of seeing it that way. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think AI needs to move past answering questions and move towards intelligence and orchestration. And that is, I think, the key to making AI successful in the enterprise, successful for your customers, is this thought around intelligence and orchestration. And that's where Plume steps up. We're 400 customers globally, 50 million homes, 500 million connected devices. That insight that we have across the globe translates into informing our engine into what to do next. The key then is taking that action and sort of having the platform that is able to control the connected home, control the Wi-Fi environment, control the flow of information across those connections. The bridge is taking that action. And frankly, Plume wasn't always there. We up until recently, we made a recent acquisition of a company called Sweeper, and that was to kind of turn our intelligence into action. And that build versus buy decision is something that we thought a lot about, and I think is important for other leaders to think about how you manage AI in the enterprise that way. Do I take a team off of sort of the core functionality of what we do, and start to build our orchestration engine, or do I acquire somebody that's been doing it for 2-3 years and bolt them on, and that's transformed our enterprise.
What made that decision for you in the build versus buy?
It was really, I think it all comes down to speed. I think there's a cost-speed dynamic, but I think in this environment, in the world we're living in, speed is everything, and our ability to, we saw ourselves falling behind. It's okay to present, so our customers are the largest broadband providers in the world, and we saw ourselves falling behind. We were presenting a lot of interesting information for people to take action on, but it was up to them to interpret it. It was up to them to decide what to do, what's next. And in this world we're living on, we needed to take that action for them, and that's what Sweeper allowed us to do. It's this AI-driven orchestration engine grabbed our intelligence and drove it forward. And we needed to do that quickly. And we found this amazing company based out of Dublin that's been doing it for 3 or 4 years and has really transformed, the small group has really transformed what you can do in a very complex environment like the connected home.
Well, and in the same way on some levels where you're having to have this build versus buy argument, conversation internally as a debate, customers are having this same debate in so many different ways in terms of what they expect, what they want their customers to get versus the time and speed that they need to deliver it in. How should they be thinking about that question?
It's an interesting question. In the broadband world, I think the broadband providers need to move from being infrastructure builders to relationship managers. The consumer historically has been trained to look at speed and price, and that's where the broadband providers have focused all their energy, either marketing cheaper services or bundling or price locks or building massive infrastructure to deliver faster speeds. But the reality is consumer experience, consumer confidence, removing friction is what I think most are really looking for. Especially if you look at Starlink and Amazon launching new services, yes, they add to the competitive landscape, but I think they're going to change the competitive dynamic.
How will it change?
Amazon, in particular, understands what a frictionless purchase experience and a frictionless end-to-end customer experience really means. It's, yes, they were often lowest price, but I think the reason why you keep coming back is it's 3 clicks to buy. And they will bring that experience to the consumer in broadband. And we all know that, while satellite might not be the fastest, it is the most convenient, and there's other ways that Amazon will bring a frictionless experience. And I think the core cable providers will have to pivot along the way and really focus in that area.
How quick do you think they'll be to do that?
I think if you're not working on it now, it's already too late. If you're not figuring out how to transform yourself into a customer-centric company, how to focus on removing friction in every step from onboarding to ongoing use to friction in care. Do you want to sit on the phone for 25 minutes waiting for somebody to ask you for the 3rd time to restart your modem?
Right.
Or do you want somebody to do you want to solve it yourself? Or do you want someone to proactively solve it or solve it in a more friendly way?
Justin Bieber doesn't want his video to buffer at Coachella for 5 seconds. So,
exactly. That's a great example. So, and he blamed the Wi-Fi. He's like, Wi-Fi is not working. The reality is Wi-Fi was probably working fine. It was the environment in which he was operating in. And, you had probably the highest number of connected devices that could have existed. It's complex. And it was the way that the packets flew across that pipe. Now, whether or not there was enough speed or whether or not connectivity was up.
Good ad for Plume.
Yes, good ad for Plume.
You've seen data from all these millions of households. What is the most surprising thing?
I think that if you think about what is talked about most in the market is all around the latest Wi-Fi technology, whether that's Wi-Fi 7 or eventually Wi-Fi 8, which is supposed to deliver on this promise of faster speed, more reliable connection. The consumer doesn't upgrade their home when they buy a new device. You might have your iPhone might operate at the latest technology, but you are accumulating technology in the home. We saw 40 or 50% of homes have some gaming console that they purchased. Most of those hold those for years at a time. When we looked at devices coming on the network towards the end of the year, more than 60 or 70% had older technology. So the home is really a fragmented environment with a disparate set of devices and technology that require, frankly, a seamless, always-on environment. Operating in that dynamic is actually quite challenging. Mm-hmm. And once having the knowledge of how to deal with all those devices is quite important. So it's just, I think it's surprising to really understand that you're not really upgrading your Wi-Fi 7 device. What you really want to do is worry about quality of outcome. That's what Justin Bieber should have been looking at. Is like, what does the outcome look like? Not is your connection fast enough? Am I delivering 2 gigabits of speed? It's how is that application running on the device at the end of the day, and that's the measure of success.
Is it too late now to say sorry? I couldn't help myself. I wonder as a parent who I care about the online safety very much I have a 2-year-old who's not really online. I have a 7-year-old. She's starting to, look at phones and connected devices. And we spoke about this a little bit before, just this idea that there are some tools out there, but so many of the tools are not being used.
It's true. I went back, after we spoke, I went back and looked at some of the stats. It's actually quite interesting. So yes, I believe that parents should be given an easy set of tools to filter out unwanted content, especially for obviously kids especially under the age of 16 or maybe even 18. And it should be easy to use, friendly, et cetera. We see things like we had an interruption in our ability to manage YouTube and the parental controls, and we got a spike in calls that was shocking to demonstrate how many people had that rule set up. And when you look at the top 3 managed sites on our network, it's YouTube, it's Roblox, it's TikTok. Adult content doesn't even make it into the top 3. It's really social media. When back to school occurs from July to August, September, we saw a 45% increase in the number of parental control setups. But I think it's still underutilized. It still could be better put up front. And I frankly think it should be given away. This shouldn't be a premium service that's offered. It should be part of the package and what we enable parents to be able to do.
When it comes to regulation and policy, what changes would make connectivity more affordable here and globally?
I think that, from a regulatory point of view, it comes down to, I guess it's, infrastructure and build requirements that allow you or encourage you to build out to rural areas. I think most of the issue that exists with connectivity is in rural environments where it's expensive to build access to, and frankly, the satellite providers and the fixed wireless access providers like the T-Mobiles and the Verizons that are offering wireless internet will be a very big solution to that. But I think in the U.S. there's programs that like BEAD and other subsidy programs that make it economical to build out to the outskirts, and I think supporting those programs is probably the most important thing you could do.
We talked AI a little bit on the macro level. I wonder on the micro, how are you using artificial intelligence? What's your go-to? What do you use it for every day?
That's a great question. I'm a big Claude Anthropic user. I have my setup every morning where at 9 a.m. it gives me a summary of my email for the past 24 hours. It looks at my calendar for the next 12 hours. It tells, it gives me an overview of the actions, tracks some of the things my team hasn't responded to in a timely manner, and sort of get that summary at the end of the day. It's actually quite interesting. The transformation inside our organization, I would say, so I'm coming up on a year at Plume here. So I think Wednesday is my 1-year anniversary at the company.
Congrats.
Thank you, I made it. We were tracking the usage of AI amongst engineers and product managers in particular, and we went from 10 to 20% penetration to about 98, almost 100% penetration, where everyone is using AI, mostly for code and product development. So that's kind of obvious and something that occurred quite quickly. The journey we're on now is finance, marketing, HR, all leveraging AI to make their jobs easier. It's not, and I want to be very, very clear here, it's not eliminating jobs. It is making the current team far more efficient and is allowing us to do more with the current organization we have. So we might not be growing the team in as fast as we thought because we are realizing enormous efficiencies, But I think it's just fascinating to watch it penetrate, especially finance, which really hasn't seen a ton of innovation. The finance team is leveraging it, in meaningful ways. That's quite interesting.
What's the most interesting thing your finance team is doing?
I mean, all the billables are being tracked in AI, and they are automatically following up on payables, and emails and reminders are going out in an automated fashion in an organized way. It's quite impressive.
And for you, you mentioned your 9 o'clock sort of overview of things. Are you working less because of it?
Oh, absolutely.
Are you spending less time? You are.
Absolutely not.
No, absolutely not.
Are you kidding me?
I didn't hear the not part.
But I am getting more done in my 8 or 9 or 12-hour day. That's for sure. And there's less room for people to squeak by, not responding. That's for sure.
Given your position, CEO of Plume, a year, what is your advice to people in this room as they think about connectivity and AI and what they can be doing to help both their businesses and their lives improve?
I think so. There's a couple of things. So I think the way we transformed the way we implement AI in the enterprise was by having a leader whose only job was to figure it out. What models we should be using, how do we rally around a process, how do I get the larger organization beyond just engineering and product to leverage it, and have a single voice that kind of sets the pace for the organization. So we have an AI czar, someone that she's amazing, and she's dictated our strategy moving forward. So I think that assigning somebody whose job it is to wake up every day and how to implement the infrastructure is quite important. I think speed matters. I've mentioned that before. If you're making a build versus buy decision, if it's complementary, our decision was to buy, and I think that transformed not only the extension of our product, but it also transformed everything in our core product as well.
Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Please welcome Salil Parekh of Infosys and Justin B. Smith of Semafor.
All right, it's wonderful to be with Salil. If we were in Mumbai or actually any world business capital, Salil is the CEO of really one of the most phenomenal companies in the world in technology, Infosys. One of the great modern Indian companies. And so welcome, Salil, the CEO. And I want to start off by, obviously, the elephant in the room, of course, is digital transformation. And what the AI revolution is doing to not just reshape just technology companies, but the entire enterprise. And so you work with literally the world's largest organizations. And from your perspective, seeing them every day, what is the real scale of this shift? And how fundamentally will AI change how large companies operate, let's say, over the next decade?
So first, thanks for having me and Infosys here. It's incredible to see what you've done, so congratulations. What we're seeing on AI with large enterprises is a huge adoption. A few weeks ago, we laid out where Infosys sees the big growth opportunities. There's 6 areas where in total we see something in the range of $300 to $400 billion of addressable market. And today we're already seeing examples of large programs at clients. So take one of the 6 areas, which is modernizing what is going on in old technology, bringing it to new areas, legacy modernization. And we see clients in financial services, we see clients in energy, we see clients in telco, big companies, US and European, working and making all of that happen. Another area that we see is building out of agents, and there, many of the processes, you take a process like KYC in a bank, you take a process on an accounts payable in many organizations, horizontal, you take a process on knowledge capture and sharing in wealth management, and all of those are being driven by agent technology and the change that's coming in. So from our perspective, huge opportunity for that sort of growth.
But many companies experimented with AI pilots, and but far fewer, and I think this is going to be a key theme this week. And I know there's a bunch of CEOs who are going to be talking about this. Very few have embedded AI into their core business processes. Someone referred to it as being a tourist or a resident. What makes a company, an organization that is either doing one or the other, that is not either just there temporarily or deeply, deeply remaking their business?
So there again, I think we have seen a shift where large companies are doing this as a resident at scale. So we have examples, and again, in the session we had a few weeks ago, we had 12 clients come in and talk about the programs they're doing at scale, all available publicly. One of the clients, a bank working on a huge modernization program. Another, a consumer products business working on how to enhance their revenue growth by customizing agents through our purchase history. Another, a telco building AI in their billing operations to make agents go much more efficiently. So what we are seeing today is a large adoption. Not every company is doing it, but the early big transformation players are making a huge bet on this. In the banking world, for example, we think the adoption is the quickest today. There's already a lot of work on regulation which AI can help automate. And then there's growth. For example, we're doing some work in credit management, where in a bank with AI agent technology, the bank team can assess credit much more efficiently and target their product more clearly. So we think the growth is at scale, not anymore just sort of testing or picking.
And what other sectors or functions are sort of at the forefront? You mentioned finance.
So there's three big areas in terms of sectors. There's financial services, energy, telco. Those are big sectors right now that we see. In terms of functions, we see, of course, code development. There are many large foundation models that are very efficient at that. We also see the usage and drive of agents. And then the whole area of customer service, that's an area that's getting a lot of traction by using agents to make changes at enterprise level.
And for boards and CEOs, it's not so much whether you do it, it's just how you organize yourself around it. So what are the strategic decisions that leaders are having to make about investment, about infrastructure, about governance?
So there, I think the success, and as in any big tech revolution change, comes from driving it with sponsorship coming from the very top. And the places where I have seen success, typically the leadership are personally engaged in it. To give you an example.
The board, the CEO?
The CEO. And the board very much involved, but the CEO very active day to day. So when we have clients visiting our campus in Bangalore, right next to my office, I have a workstation in the room next door where I have 3 large foundation models and they're coding agents. And I can show the CEOs or other executives that have come how I can build systems quickly. And I can personally build systems quickly, which is obviously surprising to many people.
With some help. Right?
With
some AI
the
help.
foundation model help, yes. But it then becomes more sort of visible to people, to CEOs, to make that happen.
Is that something you always did as CEO?
No, this is just
a
few months.
Oh,
a few months ago, I put this in because some of this technology could be a little bit daunting for maybe some of the senior people. And this is a way to make it really quite easy, in fact, to use by just giving a few instructions in English, what simple code, just to show that it can be done in that manner.
So maybe next year's World Economy Summit, we should be bringing this here live on stage.
Maybe we can do this on Wednesday or Thursday this week.
Okay,
no problem.
that's fine. See, it moves fast, my God. All right, let's talk about also another big theme, which is, of course, how AI is reshaping the workforce. It's a huge debate in America. What do you think is going to happen down this area? How are leading companies approaching the reskilling question? What models are proving most effective?
So here, I think there are different approaches. The approach we've chosen is to reskill all our 300,000 employees on AI tools. So first, we do a lot of work where in the first few months of training, we encourage the sort of recent graduate to not use any AI tools and learn how software development is done, and then bring in, after 2 or 3 months, the usage of tools and see how things are enhanced. One of the things maybe not that much talked about is AI tools, the code that is created is not the most efficient. And so we have people who are experienced who can then evaluate how that code is and make sure it becomes more efficient and used properly. A lot of it is not easy to go into production or be running right away. So we have teams that can make that be production ready, so to speak. So it's not that what you build is immediately ready for the real world. So the reskilling is most critical. And then in terms of roles, we just finished our financial year on March 31. We recruited 20,000 college graduates in that year. This year, we have the plan for another 20,000.
How many last year?
So 20, the year before that, we were at about 14,000.
Oh, so it's growing.
So it was more this previous year. But if you go like three years ago, we were more in the 40,000 type of range.
In the future?
No, I'm saying 3 years back.
Back. Okay, so
up and down.
Up and down.
Yeah.
Well, actually, which leads me to my final question, which is, I think, the biggest question, and the one that is maybe the most newsworthy, which is, ultimately, do you believe that AI will reduce labor inside large organizations or expand the scope of what companies are able to build?
So there are sense very much is it's going to expand the type of work. So to give you an example, today, just in coding, there are individuals who don't code who, because they have an idea or a concept, can get that output, build a system, and make things happen, which they couldn't do in the past. And that's true in many of the different skills that we're seeing. So our view really is going to be an expansion of the work as opposed to a reduction.
Okay, well, on that very positive note, Salil Parekh, thank you so much. Please join me, and thank you, Salil, for joining us.
Please welcome Arvind Jain of Glean and Mohammed Sergi of Semafor.
Thank you. All right. Well, day one of Semafor World Economy, and I have with me Arvind Jain, the CEO of Glean. I was telling you earlier, and we never met before, but I came across you in Qatar, and you were one of the kind of the buzzy companies there recently in the AI space, and you've really pushed beyond this enterprise search that you began with. But what is it about Glean that is different, and how have you grown beyond that first niche?
Yeah. Well, first, great to be here, and. So Glean is about 7 years old now as a company. We started in 2019, which makes us probably the world's first enterprise generative AI company. We started with enterprise search as our focus, so building a Google-like product for employees inside their company. That's how we started, like help people find information, get answers to their questions. And then as AI technologies and models got better and better, it allowed us to actually improve our product. Today, you can think of it like ChatGPT, but a version of ChatGPT that knows everything about your company, your people, your projects, your customers. It knows how your company works, and it can use that knowledge to help you with any task that you want to do with AI today. So it's, so we've developed into more like an agentic coworker and also a horizontal agent platform for the businesses.
Can you give me an example of a company that has used this, and what did they get out of it in the end?
Yeah. So our core use case is deploying this as the primary AI product inside the enterprise for every employee. So as an example, NVIDIA uses Glean, LinkedIn uses Glean for all of their employees. It's the place where people go to every day whenever they have any questions, whenever they're looking for any information, when they want to use AI to actually write something for them, do some analysis. So it's quite general purpose, very horizontal in nature. Very much like how you use all these other AI tools like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini. The only difference is that from Glean you can use all of those models from one place, but more importantly, it's connected to your internal company systems, so it understands your business a lot more. So people go there on a day-to-day basis to connect with experts, subject matter experts within their companies, different roles. So if legal people, for example, lawyers can go there to review contracts. Support people can actually auto-resolve tickets with it. Developers can go write code. So it's like how anybody would use an AI tool. They use Glean across different functions.
Okay. So maybe that connectivity is probably why there's a lot of studies that show AI adoption. Companies that have adopted AI are not getting the ROI, the return on investment on that. And it seems to be that there's this disconnect between getting into the tool or getting into a chatbot and then accessing the entire history and legacy of a company and actually getting something useful out of it. So is this what you're trying to bridge and in a way solve?
Yeah, if you think about AI models, they're very powerful. They have amazing reasoning capabilities, intelligence baked in. They have a deep knowledge of the world, how work happens, how as humans, we think we complete work. But unfortunately, they don't know much about your company and the inner ways of how your people work. And so that missing context is often what comes in the way of AI becoming really useful for you and your different business processes. And that's the problem that you need to solve. You have to bring that context. You have to bring that knowledge of, take any task. Let's say you want to automate, build an agent to automate a particular task. If you start to just use AI as a independent technology, not connected with your company's context, then it's kind of starting with zero understanding of how your people have been doing that work over the years. It's not benefiting from that human intelligence, because ultimately AI has to learn from the intelligence of your own team. And so that's the thing that when you look at the last 2 years, a lot of AI projects basically failed because employees would come and report that it's too generic. It doesn't sort of understand how we actually solve a particular business problem. And so that's what is now changing. So in the last year or so, you see many of these AI companies are starting to connect AI with that context inside their company, and that's what we do at Glean. When you deploy Glean inside an enterprise, we will go and connect with all of the internal systems. We'll actually look at every task that people are completing. We'll observe and see what they do, how they solve those problems, and then bringing that collective human intelligence of an enterprise together and making it available to AI systems, allow these AI systems to then start at that level of the expert in your company and then go beyond that. And that's sort of what allows you to truly solve problems at a meaningful sort of scale and quality.
And is that process human driven? Do you have to send in teams of engineers and I guess consultants to figure out how to gather together, or is it automated?
No, with Glean it's automated. The way Glean learns about how your company works is by connecting with your enterprise systems. And these enterprise systems are standard, they have open APIs. So there's nothing specific that we have to do on a per business basis to make the product work. So typically our engineers sit in our offices, they don't typically go on site at our customers, and the product gets deployed. by our customers in a more turnkey fashion.
So what you do, so the agents themselves, they go, you create the agents, and then I guess you have to provide parameters or restrictions on them. And this comes to the question of trust and security. Everybody's rushing to do these things, but how do you do it in a constrained way where you're not giving up, company reports to the intern and vice versa?
Yeah, that's a very important topic. I mean, today there is so much pressure that leaders in an enterprise feel, about AI. Everybody feels like they have to roll out AI solutions, otherwise they're going to fall behind. And oftentimes, it's coming at a risk of rolling out AI, in a unsafe manner. There are so many security challenges, that come when you deploy these, AI solutions, which are now, which have tremendous power. They can basically take actions in your enterprise systems. They can change your data. And if you don't do this in a safe manner, then AI can actually, instead of helping you, it can actually create a lot of damage. So things like, what you mentioned, how do you make sure that an intern that has very limited access to information within your business, they should not get access to an AI tool that can certainly read all information and data inside your company. Yeah. So when you roll out these agents, when you roll out any AI product, you have to make sure that it is safe and secure. It knows who's using that product, and it restricts, itself to only using that data and knowledge inside the company that individual actually has permissions to use. It doesn't take any unsafe actions. And so that's a critical part of rolling out AI. I'll share this thing right now. For example, we're going through this, the open claw and Claude mania, where people have seen very, very cool things with long-term delegated agents that run, with no real specific task that they're supposed to solve, but they have full agency where an agent runs 24/7, and it decides on its own what work it should do. And people saw fascinating results, when you run AI, in that mode. And now everybody, these employees are clamoring, to actually have tools like those inside workplace. And some companies, did deploy them, and it was a big disaster because it goes and deletes, all the files on a computer and things like that. So I think rolling out AI it's extremely important to sort of balance, that desire for innovation and moving fast with doing it in a safe and secure manner and following, all the security practices that you have internally.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, balance, and there's a lot of people who have this, AI, agentic AI FOMO in a way where, some of your friends are running code and creating all these programs and, making your messages sent to your loved one saying, I love you, while you're out in the game doing whatever you want to do. And the question here is, I booked my own flight to get here. What is real today with agents? What is premature and what is next? It's really these three things I want to get at.
Well, one thing, which, so we serve large enterprises, and, we have, over 1,000 enterprises that are our customers. And every single one of them always tells me that, hey, look, we are behind. We feel behind. And I tell them, no, you're actually not. When I look at all the work that you've done, and when we compare it with, every other company that we work with, there's this sort of general feeling from everyone, because, when you read the media, you see people doing amazing, great things with AI. You see people claiming, big impact, from deploying AI. There's, of course, Block, said that they can actually now work with half the workforce and be equally effective. So this puts a lot of pressure on every business, and this, creates this feeling of being behind. But I think the reality, based on what we see, we have very, very large amounts of sort of data and awareness from all the different enterprises, that today, I would say that the key progress that we made so far is that AI now has full awareness within enterprises. And a good chunk of your employees are actually learning how to use AI effectively and change the way they work. And so that part is real, that these general purpose tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Glean or Copilot, they're starting to get that adoption. But even there we are, we're following a power law. 10% of the users are really getting, ahead, with AI, and 90% are being left behind, and we have to fix that. We have to figure out, but that should be the priority for every business right now. It's not so much that, hey, how much work have you done improving your bottom line or top line. First, make sure that, you have a workforce that is getting ready for that future, because in the future we all have to use AI. There's no confusion around that part. So and there are some ways that we are thinking about on how to actually democratize AI further in an enterprise, how to bring it to every person. And one way to do that is by having AI come to people as opposed to you going to AI tools. Today that's what it is. If you want to use AI to benefit you, you have to go to AI products and ask them for help, ask them for questions. In the future, you will see AI that truly and personally understands you and actually proactively does work, that you need it to do. So that's sort of is where we're making progress. But in terms of where are we making more impact? There are certain areas, for example, in software engineering, coding now is something where AI is fully making an impact. In fact, many companies have even banned humans writing code now. Humans only get to review code that AI writes. Customer service is another domain where people have seen more than 50% efficiency and how fast they can resolve tickets. So slowly and steadily, we're getting there, function by function. You can see big impact that AI is actually now making in your.
So that's what we're going to see next year, is a bit more of that taking hold. Question for you, and this is where we started really, the appetite from investors and really from the market to invest in companies like yours and others. I believe I have the numbers right, but you went from $2.2 billion valuation to $7.2 billion valuation in your last round, which was probably within a year. Your revenue shot up 2x. But it was a Series F, right? So we're getting long in the tooth there. We're seeing companies going public, but you really stuck to the private market. Is there this pressure to go public, or are the private markets providing enough capital that you don't need to look there?
Well, AI companies have plenty of capital available in private markets, so that's but I think it's not for AI companies. I would say right now it's not the fact that, hey, do you need to do it? Do you have capital available or not? I don't think there's most AI companies don't have stable enough business right now, including ours. And the reason I say that is because this technology changes so fast. Typically you would think about a business that you build a stable foundation, a moat, there is enough IP that is going to sort of drive value for the long run, and those things don't apply anymore. Anything that you built, all the technology that you actually developed over the last 6 months, is actually already obsolete in some ways, and you have to keep doing it.
So you're kind of disrupting yourself as you go along.
You have to continuously do that, and the market is also changing, rapidly. So I feel there's, for most AI companies, especially which are application layer and above, it's they need to wait. They need to sort of see how the foundation sort of stabilizes. So that's why you'll see the companies that actually are going public in AI space are all infrastructure level companies.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that. There will be another series, I guess, coming out, and hopefully we can get a piece. Thank you so much, Arvind. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
Please welcome Jason Beekal of Amazon and Whole Foods Market, Bill Schufelt of Athletic Brewing Company, and Phil Mattingly of CNN.
All right. I've spent most of the last 30 minutes in the green room learning about things that I thought were fads that in fact are actually quite durable and ingrained. And also, Amazon is a rather impressive structural company, it turns out. It's my breaking news. Please cite me if you're going to do this. I am really excited for this conversation because I think there are a lot of things happening in the consumer space as it pertains to what both of you guys are kind of playing central roles in different parts of kind of the supply chain on some level. And your views on those elements are really, really integral to understanding this moment. And Jason, I want to start with you in terms of, Amazon grocery, obviously Whole Foods. What are you seeing about consumer trends right now that maybe people would think, okay, this is a fad, or maybe this is because people made New Year's resolutions, or maybe because there's some type of overlap with the kind of mass production of GLP-1s, where you're saying, no, this is something that's durable and locked in from a consumer behavior standpoint?
Yeah, as you were just saying, I don't think this is a fad at all. This has been a cultural shift where consumers have gravitated towards health and wellness, and this is now a consideration as they're making food purchases and deciding what they're putting in their bodies. And I don't think of this as a singular decision, though. It's not something like, I'm just going to be healthy. This is a decision that consumers have to make day in, day out. And as a retailer, we have to make sure that we can support all those different occasions that our customers are looking to have supported in this space. Just because you're deciding that you're going to eat less sugar, be healthy, doesn't mean that you're not going to also decide to indulge and enjoy things that you like as well. I think it's all about in moderation and what is the majority of the things that you're looking to consume. When we look at the actual data behind this, if you look at right now, organic and better for you is growing twice as fast as conventional grocery. Across America, nearly 50% of consumers took a New Year's resolution this year saying, I'm going to eat more vegetables, more fruit, and have less sugar. And when you look over the last 10 years, what consumers have defined as quality has changed. Before it was around health and wellness. Before it was around dietary needs, and now it has shifted towards what is that product, and it's making sure that it is far less produced products, and ultimately that they're ultimately more sustainable as well. And so this is showing consumers don't just care about what they're eating. They care about what does it mean for the environment, what does it mean for workers, what does it mean for the communities that these products are produced in.
Bill, from probably a more micro, but also just a really impressive anecdotal level, in your mind, what kind of triggered the broad shift in how consumers view non-alcoholic beer? Was it better product, better marketing, or all of the above? What did you see as you guys became kind of a dominant force in this cultural change on some level?
Yeah, I think, first of all, so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and alongside you too. It's an honor. Yeah, building on that, really, I started all the way down at the consumer end and have kind of built my way back up the stream a little bit. But these health and wellness trends are so apparent in what we're seeing. We've seen it a few times now in kind of the gluten-free movement, a bit of the plant-based, alcohol moderation, now GLP-1s, and exactly what you said, like the indulgence without any of the sacrifice. And at Athletic, we like to say without compromise. I started all the way down at the consumer level, and I was living that life. I was working at one of the world's biggest hedge funds, a very typical high-performance adult life where I was trying to improve all these different vectors of my life, from career to family to health to sleep to athletic performance and stuff. And alcohol was a ceiling on all of those things, I realized, and that was the beginning of my health and wellness journey. When I removed that ceiling, I all of a sudden could improve all these different areas of my life, and I've since iterated on all those things. And I realized that I was living a very typical adult life, and those options did not exist out there in the world. And I thought this micro experience that I'm having, busy family professional is a extremely relatable experience. And the more I asked friends and family, a lot of people related to that. And so I started to set out to try to fix that and improve that. And I thought by making moderation cool, delicious, and accessible could have an untold positive impact on tens of millions of people out there in the world. And that has started to play out in many parts thanks to our partnership, where the Athletic Brewing Discovery story was actually at a local Whole Foods in Brooklyn, where we basically walked in with home-brewed, hand-bottled beer in unlabeled bottles, so no branding at all. And I basically was like, I'm a huge Whole Foods customer, and I think your customers will love this. And credit to the local forager, she said, this is incredible. And she got me an appointment to the regional next week, and we've since grown it from there. But it's that kind of grassroots discovery and identification of the trend that has built from here. So fun to be on the stage together.
And now our top brand across the adult beverage category as well.
And that's how it works. Like if I roll into a Whole Foods tomorrow and with like a couple plastic bags and say, this is the thing, you're going to eventually turn me into a dominant corporate force. That's a promise?
Absolutely not. But what I would say is our local foragers are out there and looking at not only what is trending in the marketplace, but looking at the customer insights to say, how do we match those things together? And this was something really special. We saw consumers wanting to have better options in adult beverage without alcohol. And many of those things were tied to the health and wellness pieces that were sort of mentioned there around how do you make sure that you can get better sleep, you can better perform in whatever athletic activity that you're competing in, I can perform better at work, better family life. And so this is a way to try to help look at how do you take some of those trends. And at this point, again, this is something that has just become a major catalyst and change that we've seen across the entire adult bev industry.
How does consumer anxiety about prices, consumer anxiety about persistent inflation over time, over the course of the last 7-8 years in some level, feed into how you're making decisions right now in this space?
Well, I think at a broad level, we want to make sure that we can always bring value and quality to our customers and ultimately fulfill the needs of what they're looking for. And one of the ways that I get excited about is ways that we can present options to customers. Whether it's looking at something like a health and wellness and how do you filter, identify for those products, the same way in how we can bring promotions or bring what are great opening price points across any type of category. So a consumer can help look at what are the options that are right for them at the same time. And so I don't look at it, just like eating healthy or not is an option. The same thing with how you look at value. We want to make sure that we can bring multiple different options and choices for customers to select from.
How cognizant are you of like the macro economy? Like if you see 2 straight months of bad CPI numbers, are you saying like, oh, we have a problem here?
Well, I think probably very similar to, well, I guess the Amazon business is just a whole nother exponential of taking the long view, but at Athletic, we took very unpopular long-term views on how we were going to build the company from the start, which, especially for a room full of CEOs and leaders who are making decisions, we kind of removed ourselves from that monthly or quarterly cycle and looked at where do we want to be in 5 or 10 years and thought that making the unpopular decision of building our own manufacturing, hiring everything we do as an internal full-time teammate was going to be an expensive but the right choice for our customers. And that was 2018. Since then, we've probably seen about 6 different economic cycles in very fast succession. And that decision has proven right over and over again. We've been able to absorb the volatility of COVID, interest rate hikes, and different things throughout that whole period. And ultimately, that consistency and ability to telegraph and control production in-house has allowed us to smooth that out for our customers a lot. And often, with our partners, see through those peaks and valleys. And so, yeah, I would just encourage looking as long out as you can in all the business decisions.
Jason, real estate, both actual shelf space, digital shelf space is absolutely critical, I think, for products. How are you thinking through kind of products like Athletic, where they should be positioned, and what kind of an effect does that have on those products?
Yeah, I mean, deciding where those products are merchandised is a really important part of the overall customer experience. I think on the online side, one of the things is, our goal is to bring the breadth of whatever we can for our customers. And one of the things that we're trying to do at the same time is we know convenience is really, really important for customers. So we've been bringing new offerings within our same-day business. We have launched an entire grocery business so consumers can get all of their grocery needs, whether it's fresh produce, meat, seafood, and everything you need from a grocery standpoint and get it as little as an hour. So we brought a new Rush 1 hour, 3 hour delivery as part of this. And at the same time, we've also introduced Amazon Now, which is 30 minutes or less across the most important things you need in your daily life, including groceries, including athletic brewing beer. And this is something where in that case, you have to make the selection of the right options for that 30 minutes. You can't have everything available. And so we're precisely looking at not just at a macro level, but for this microcosm, this ultimately like small network zone that we're going to deliver to, what is the most important items that we need to carry? And we're doing the same thing at a store level. So if you take DC here, our nearest Whole Foods Market store on P Street versus the Foggy Bottom store, which is just about a mile away, is very different on the consumer perspective. You've got the P Street store, which is very high daytime population. The Foggy Bottom store is on a college campus. If you compare that to the Walter Reed store, which has much higher baskets, more family shopping, we ultimately have to make sure that we have the selection that is right at each one of those stores. And so previously, we would have looked at this as an entire metro, the same selection. And we're now using AI to help look at what are the ways that we can have the assortment show up for the consumers to meet their needs and ultimately determine when we bring the assortment in and out at the same time and working up through the supply chain to make sure that we can support this uniqueness. And so this might, in one case, have us carry athletic beer in sort of single, cool, ready to drink on the Foggy Bottom store, which might not be a need at the Walter Reed store. And so
college kids.
Yeah, exactly. And college kids who are leaning into more NA versions of adult beverage at the same time. And so those are the types of things we're using AI to make sure that we can acutely understand whether we are going to deliver the product to your home in 30 minutes or less, or have you buy at our stores, how we can make sure that we've got the absolute right selection for our customers.
How cognizant are you of that process, and how does that change maybe either how you integrate tech or how your marketing kind of operation is thinking through things?
For sure. I think it bridges both the sales and marketing side, and we try to start with our own data to make it as helpful as we can for our partners. So we came into a very legacy industry, very rigid tiers, a lot of people operating still on paper and paper invoices and stuff throughout the beer industry. We launched the first ever beer on e-commerce at that time, which allows us to iterate at a really small scale and get a lot of data, hundreds of thousands of direct touch points with our customers. And we probably release 50 new, very micro innovations a year, as small as 100 cases of beer, up to 1,500 barrels of beer out to the audience. And then when something clicks, we can bring it to our partners with a much higher degree of certainty that this has a real audience. We know where they live. We know where they so we have so much more data than the rest of the industry when it came in that allows us to bring a lot of data to the conversation. But then going from the support side too, we can work with our partners, the level of detail we have together of what is on the shelf in what regions. And then we do targeted marketing out there, either digitally, all the way up to TV advertising, all the way down to local activation at the street. We probably hand out 1 million beers a year to drive people to our partner stores. In person, we're right down the street at the Cherry Blossoms 10K yesterday, handing out beers as a team. So there's a lot to do on the data on our side to support our partners too in the world that way.
What was something, Bill, you were convinced was going to be brilliant and work wonderfully that ended up failing catastrophically?
Well, one of the earliest findings was I thought getting to the shelf was a huge win. And then you realize that nothing had changed on the non-alcoholic beer shelf in 30 years, and no one was looking at it anymore. As excited as the local buyer might have been that there was something new on the shelf. So I probably did 75 events that first summer, handing out 500 to 1,000 beers a weekend and telling people, go buy it at Whole Foods. And so that was, in a series of thousands of surprises, that was one of them.
Jason, same to you?
Yeah, I think sometimes the same thing where you think if you build it, they will come type of deal. And whether that's been product offerings or different store concepts and things, I think it's ultimately always making sure that you're thinking about how is a customer going to relate to this offering. And so the biggest focus we always bring is how do we make sure that we can test, iterate, bring something, and then make sure that we can easily adapt if something is not working well. And one of those examples I would give is, we had a program that was called Health Starts Here, and our customers told us they want healthier options. They wanted, no oil, they wanted no salt, no sugar, and so we brought a bunch of these offerings together in our prepared foods. And we found is a lot of people didn't buy it. We kind of joked for a while, no oil, no salt, no sugar, no sales. And a piece of it was we probably took some of those steps too far. And so we have to make sure that we meet customers where they're at. And they may not jump into all of those things. And maybe it didn't mean no, it meant less. And so as we continue to iterate, we've been able to find that right balance of healthy, better for you options and make sure that we're always listening and looking at what the customer's saying. But sometimes you have to make sure that you don't take every single point literally. And one of the things I always say is if our customers actually did everything they said they were going to do, our jobs would be a lot easier. And so we have to make sure we can sort of look at the most important parts, take those anecdotes, and make sure that we're bringing those offerings that we think can also be successful and can scale.
Bill, your success, I think, has corresponded with just the space has gotten a lot more competitive for good reason. Obviously, your success is something that others want to emulate. As you look forward, make a really grand pronouncement you're definitely going to regret about where you're going to be in the next couple of years compared to your greatest competitors in the space. You're a private company, so you can say whatever you want right now.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage, and I'm definitely one of the most optimistic people out there. But this is actually now, in 2017, I had a 96-page white paper that I was going around to investors and getting like a 80% reject rate about non-alcoholic beer. And what I was saying in those moments was some countries in Europe have gone to 10 to 15% of the beer market is non-alcoholic beer. The US could be that in 5 to 10 years, and it's going to go way past that. And everyone still laughs at me in the industry. I'm like, no, there are actually data points now in the industry where last year in January, non-alcoholic beer as a percent of beer in Whole Foods touched 20% of total beer. So like it went from 0.3% to 20% in the span of about 7 or 8 years. And we think it's going way past that.
And as a public company executive, you have 35 seconds to also do the same thing, grand pronouncement that definitely is going to move the stock. No, but 30 seconds left. What's your kind of goals as you look at the competitive space in your world?
Yeah, our job is to be leading the tip of the spear in this space, both with Amazon and Whole Foods, and how we can make sure that we can bring health and wellness options to our customers in the easiest way possible so they can ultimately get them at an affordable price, the convenience that meets their needs, and serving their entire family.
Bill, Jason, really appreciate your time. Incredible stories. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Really appreciate it.
Please welcome Kunal Kapoor of Morningstar, Woodson Martin of OutSystems, and Rohan Goswami of Semafor.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Woodson, you're building an AI product, or helping companies build AI products. Kunal, you are valuing the companies that build them, and it seems between the two of us, certainly not me, we are well positioned to answer the question of whether we're in a bubble right now when it comes to AI, whether things have gotten a little too peaky, a little too frothy. Kunal, I want to start with you over there.
Yeah, from an investment perspective, I think the word bubble is like a hard word to use in this context. As always, when you have a new developing industry, you're going to see a lot of capital flow to it, and you're certainly seeing that happen here. One could argue whether it's too much or too little, but I don't think that's the right question. I think the question is if you're trying to invest, where do you invest? And we were talking backstage, so for example, you have a lot of the hyperscalers maybe even coming public right now. And historically, a lot of these companies would come public at much smaller market caps. And so the question from my perspective is if a company comes public at a 1 trillion market cap, is it that exciting anymore from an investment perspective, or have the best days been sort of earned in the private markets? And so I don't know if it's a bubble, but I definitely think there's a situation where future returns may be more moderated than past returns have been. And I also think that we might be in a world where equal weighted market indexes are going to do better than market cap weighted indexes in the next 5 to 7 years vis-a-vis what we've had so far. So that's how I'd frame it up.
Let's dig into the hyperscaler part of it in a second. But you sit in a slightly different spot. First of all, lay out for us what OutSystems is and sort of what your thoughts are on the space more broadly.
Sure. We're an AI platform company, an agentic systems platform, 2,500 customers around the world, industries like insurance, banking, manufacturing, government, use our technologies to enable an agentic enterprise, really to build the foundational layer for engineering context in taking advantage of AI in your core business processes, to bring it up-leveling the employees in your organization, and also building the core software assets that operate your enterprise.
You're not incentivized to say yes to this, but let's run with Kunal's sort of rejection of the premise. Do you think that there's value to be created down the road for these AI companies? Are you and your peers sort of reaching peak valuation right now?
Oh, I think we're at the very beginning here. I think we are infatuated today, of course, with the power of models, and there's good reason for that. The experience of using the models, the new models that come out every month, these are intoxicating in terms of the transformational experience they give us as individuals. I'm sure most of the CEOs in the room have experimented personally with things like Claude Code in the last few weeks, transformational impact. But when you think about translating that kind of experience to the core infrastructure of your company, you realize a few things quick. If you've used Claude, you realize you got to give it context so it can help you reason through your own problems. How do you do that at scale in a governed way where the data assets you can secure, where you can govern access to those things, where you can be sure that critical information isn't escaping your enterprise? You really need a backbone to support all that allows you to hot swap out technologies as new models come along. And so I think that's just an example of the kind of new software infrastructure that's required to really take full advantage of the potential of AI to disrupt and reinvent our businesses.
Kunal, I want to get into how AI is changing research and investment analysis, but keeping your analyst hat on for a second, the way that AI companies are spending, it's at a scale that, other than maybe the big oil majors, we've never seen before.
Yeah, surpassing the big oil majors.
Surpassing, absolutely. But it, for me, begs a question, right? Are these companies actually good stewards of capital? Does OpenAI need to raise, and are they doing the best that they possibly can, allocating $122 billion?
It's too early to say that. I think the more interesting question potentially is, are all the companies across the economy doing that as well, right? And I think what you're going to see, you've heard different speakers talk about this, is you have to meet a certain level of spend. I think there's no doubt there's massive gains to be had. So you're going to see a lot of spending in the broader economy. And the question is, at the roll-up level, is it going to work or not? My guess is you're going to have one or two significant winners, and some will have proven to not have been good capital allocators. But the reality is, some of the hyperscalers who are in the public markets even are throwing off so much cash today that it's probably not making a dent on their balance sheets to be kind of leaning in the way that they are. And so I would say for now, the answer is yes.
For now. Where you sit, Woodson, you spent a long time at Salesforce, and there has been this well-documented, right, SaaSpocalypse, which you can argue is overblown or is overhyped, is an overcorrection, but it's happening and it's continuing. And there is clearly an emergent category of haves and have-nots, those who have proprietary data, who have proprietary processes that seem well-positioned to win here. What's your perspective as someone who spent 20 years at Salesforce? A long time at Salesforce.
18 years
at Salesforce. What do you think of firms, legacy firms like Salesforce, SAP, competing in this modern arena? Do they have a chance?
Yes, I think they have a chance. I think again, we're at super early innings of this game. I think that the markets today, most investors I speak with, certainly retail investors today, have very little understanding of the complexity of true enterprises, probably the types of organizations that you run. and the sort of requirements that you have, whether they are regulatory, whether they are artifacts of your existing contracts with customers, suppliers, or whether they are values-driven by your organization, you operate with a set of constraints that means we cannot simply drop in these technologies without a proper system of governance and oversight that allow us to continue to meet our regulatory requirements. And I think if you talk to CEOs around the world, and obviously we have a lot in the room here today, we're all wrestling with the question of how do we responsibly adopt this technology, deliver the benefits that we know are possible, but continue to meet our fiduciary responsibilities, our legal obligations, our regulatory obligations in the business as we operate. And it's going to be companies that really deeply understand those challenges in your enterprise, who have helped you work through those in the past. They're going to have a very important position helping you work through those challenges also in the future, in part because they have custody of some of your most important data today.
Yeah, can I add two quick things? I think those that have data already embedded in them have a much better chance of making it to the other side. So I think companies that are very deeply integrated and pulling companies' data already, very hard to strip them out. Second, I think if you did a survey of most of the CEOs here and said, hey, would you like certainty in what you're paying or uncertainty in what you're paying? People aren't going to say, like, across my cost structure, I just want tokens. Like, no,
this
it's
is a
not
defense of the SaaS seat model here?
It's a subscription model.
Yeah.
Like, you can call it whatever you want. And they've endured for a long time because there's value in certainty. I mean, I even just think of it, just take our Prime subscriptions. Like, if suddenly we said, okay, no Prime subscription, what are you going to be ordering on Amazon? Are you going to, like, think again twice the next time you have to get a toothbrush or whatever? You will.
Yeah.
But you also want, as a company too, you want to be able to not have to think about that every time. And I do think even as a CEO today, when I look at the companies we're working with where we have to buy tokens, there's a lot of uncertainty in that
I was going to say, there's an undertones of frustration in your voice here.
We have this conversation every day with customers. There's obviously transition happening in pricing models around software, traditional seat licensing for SaaS. On the one hand, outcome-based models with shared risk, shared reward. On the other side, I do agree with you that quite often the conversation, we have exploratory conversation, and then we come back to, and this year, this is the budget, and we need things to sort of fit in this box. I do think that is a reality today. That pressure will always be there, but I do think we're going to see diversity in revenue streams in these businesses. I think part of it is driven by what we've seen with infrastructure as a service and the hyperscalers and the models that we've gotten used to in the enterprise, and the large commits as a way to moderate whether we've got exact control over our spend or not. But I do see evolution in pricing models as significant, and I think the leading players will make, and have already, and will continue to make significant moves to adapt to market demand around pricing.
Kunal, you guys possess a massive data set in PitchBook, among other things. I have used Claude to sort of run impromptu coverage analysis of companies that I cover or deals that I'm chasing. How are you using AI, other than clearly spending more than you want to be spending on it? How are you using AI in your business today? What does the job of a research analyst look like 2 years
ago? It's not just the job of the research analyst. I think you have to use it in every part of the company, right? And so top to bottom, even in our finance and HR functions, it's a big part of what we're asking them to be thinking of. But the biggest gains we're seeing are actually in data collection and how we're going about doing that. Now, it's interesting because we saw big gains when machine learning really started to take off some time back, and now we're seeing big gains as well. And so what's different is we're just able to collect a lot more with the same amount of spend, at least so far.
Collect meaning data?
Yes.
Okay.
The pace, the quality, the depth, the breadth is just enhanced. Now, what's interesting is, turns out that some data is also becoming more generic. And so it does put pressure on you to take your research and the data you're collecting and put IP onto it. And I think that that's kind of where you get the edge, and that's where we're kind of leaning in, is just sort of making sure our analysts are refreshing our data.
I'm used to, as I'm sure most IR CFO folks are, getting a deluge of coverage reports in my inbox every morning. Does the delivery mechanism for your reports and your analysis change? Does it become embedded in the models themselves? Is that a conversation you're having?
I think it depends on the customer. I think the customer can consume it in many ways, as they always have. We've always been flexible in that capacity, and I think that will remain the case. Now, what will be interesting is what's the future in terms of how all of this is licensed. So, for example, last week, I was sitting down with one of our product managers, and we went on Gemini and did just a simple search. What are the top-rated dividend stocks right now? So, interestingly, it gave us a list of 8 stocks. 2, it had links to Morningstar.
Good.
1, it had a link to another firm that I think is quite good. And 5, no links or attribution. Now, you see that, and you're like, OK, what's valuable? And our bet is going to be that the attribution is going to be valuable. Will there be a subset of people who will maybe not want the attribution? I think you see that. There's sort of a casual user that maybe will not want it. But I think ultimately, the attribution matters, and people are going to pay for it.
It matters to investors. Are you saying that you would pay for preferential, the way that you probably do now with Google search, preferential placement in a Gemini or a Claude?
I think it's inevitable, yeah.
I think I just got to add here. I think for the moment, the person looking at that result, an investor trying to make that decision, is weighing whether there's an attribution or there isn't. But I think tomorrow, that's not even going to be a person. That's going to be somebody's agent.
That's right.
Who's looking at that. And I think that we need to be thinking about that in every aspect of every business that we operate, that increasingly we're not dealing with humans browsing the web. We're dealing with an intelligent agent that is working on behalf of a human who has a desire or a need and is optimizing across your result that you saw in Gemini, across your site directly, across every other model. And these agents are working on our behalf. And a big thing that we need to start thinking about as we design any product or service today is what is the agent experience management that we are doing, right? It's not about a UX design anymore and pretty boxes with rounded corners and nice soft colors on buttons on websites, right? It becomes how do we optimize for the outcome that the agent is trying to deliver to whoever its customer is. And so I do think we have to rethink a lot about the value chains, and especially when it comes to anything that's sort of retail oriented. I think it's going to be ChatGPT or Claude doing all your shopping.
Somewhere in between a fully agentic world and where we are now, a lot of people are going to get sued, and they're going to get sued when things go wrong. If I'm a CEO and you've built me a system where Claude is somehow materially damaged my business, who assumes the risk there? From where you sit, and maybe from where you sit too, is it the customer, the end user, or is it the person or people who are building the products? Who gets sued?
I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of answers to that question play out in courts.
Let's ask ChatGPT.
Right?
Let's ask Gemini.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's the people in this room who get sued, right? It's the CEOs. That's who ultimately where accountability falls. I do think the question of how do we protect ourselves as legal entities, how do we put in place the right kind of guardrails? You know, you think the earliest days of these chatbots and our exposure to AIs, the question were, would they go off script? How far off script would they go? There's been the whole argument around what happens with pornography and explicit content and these things. I think we all have to be super conscious that we will need infrastructure in our organizations to implement a consistent set of hardened guardrails across all AI execution, whether that is for our internal operations, whether that is for our interactions with our customers or our supply chain, thinking about how you build the kind of infrastructure that really governs at the transaction level to ensure that things don't go off script and that you don't have brand new risk introduced at scale. Those are the challenges that we'll need to be solving over the course of the next few months and years. But lots of people are going to get sued, I'm sure.
I think the risk of not acting is much greater than the risk of getting sued.
Yeah.
And so I think you got to lean into it regardless. The other point I would make is historically the startup would never get sued and the established company would get sued. Well, it turns out that these days the startups are worth $1 trillion and have hundreds of billions. And so I think that also changes things a little bit.
There are many media companies suing many AI companies
over
IP. Kunal, this is not, stepping back a little bit on a more macro perspective, have there been companies over the last year, we've had tariffs, we've had supply chain issues, now we have the crisis, the war in Iran. Are there companies or sectors that have stood out to you unusually as being well positioned or navigating these situations, these waters particularly well?
I mean, I would make a comment here just that I think, broadly speaking, companies have been pretty adept at negotiating a pretty diverse set of challenges over the last 18 months. And I don't know that you can point at a particular sector and say this sector has done better than one or the other. But clearly, if you go to the infrastructure sessions, you're seeing a lot of those companies have had to adapt the fastest because they rely on hard goods and commodities. And that's been, I think, a very different and difficult world. I think the one area that people are having the most challenge adapting to is inflation, where it has been probably more persistent than people expected. And you see that particularly in the consumer area. And if you look at the performance of companies in the market, consumer stocks have generally lagged. And that's partly because inflation has been a real issue for them and hard to navigate.
I'll throw out one comment on that, which is I think the customers that we're in the companies that we're seeing who are doing a little better right now than others in weathering this storm are ones who've been investing in resiliency for a while. And there's a lot happening in the conversation around sovereignty, digital sovereignty for enterprises today. And it's clear that those who have carefully thought that through have not put all their eggs in one basket and have operational resilience are benefiting. And it's not a purely an IT thing, of course. That's across the board. And that's, I would say, the broad category.
Well, Kunal Woodson, we'll have to leave it here. Thanks so much for your time this day.
Yeah,
thank you
for having us.
Please welcome Cristiano Amon of Qualcomm Incorporated and Reid Albergotti of Semafor.
Cristiano, good to see you. Thank you for being here.
No, happy to be here. Good talking to you, Reid.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming. Great to see a packed house. I'm sure a lot of people here have your products, maybe all of them, in their pockets right now. So I want to start off with a mobile question. As I was preparing for this conference, I wasn't downloading apps from the App Store to help me prepare. I was making apps and then making them available on my mobile phone. And it had nothing to do with the App Store. So I'm wondering if you could tell us your vision in this AI future where people are, talking with agents, things like OpenClaw on their phone, and not going through these really iOS and Android. How does that change the whole mobile ecosystem?
Look, it's a great topic of conversation. I think obviously we're very opinionated on this because I think what we have seen is every time you have a big change in wireless, you see a big shift in the players, you see a lot of shifts in what the control points are, and I think it's not going to be different when you think about the transition of phones to AI, even to 6G. But I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit because it's a very interesting, I think, point of conversation. There are absolutely two things happening in the mobile ecosystem, and those two things will lead to big changes, and I'm going to break that down for you. One, which is important, is AI now has the ability to take a very important role in the man-machine interface, because now we can communicate the computers the way we communicate with each other. It will read what we read, it will see what we see, will hear what we hear, and you can interact with agents, and therefore you have a completely different way to interact with your devices. The second thing that is happening is the explosion, and I think very comfortable saying 2026 is going to be the year of agents, exactly like that. You go do apps are going to be agents that you tell the agent what you want, and will create apps or do things for you. We're starting to see that. So how this is going to, change the mobile ecosystem? And let me start breaking that down. One thing is we are used now to, and it's part of what we do every day. We have the smartphone as the center of our digital life. So the smartphone is at the very center. Everything else is around that smartphone, is around the OS and the App Store and the experiences, and you have all the apps in there, and you go from one app to another app, and download the app you want, exactly as you said, and that's the center of your digital life. So much so that even things like wearables, they're being designed to extend the functionality of the smartphone. Think about a watch will get sensor data from you to the phone, will get notification back to you, and allow you to see time, right? However, the center of the digital experience is changing to the agent. And that happens now when it changes to the agent. It's no longer the smartphone at the center. The agent's at the center. So the agents that you choose to use are going to be the ones that are going to be very relevant. And that experience is going to happen across different devices. The phone is no longer at the very center. It's around the agent, like those other class of devices.
Can I ask you a question, just because I'm looking at the clock?
Yes.
What does that mean for Apple?
Well, it means that it's a big change. I think, if you look about, if you buy a phone from Apple and you have the iOS and you have the App Store, that's going to be a relevant question is which agent are you going to use? Is it going to be Apple agents? It's going to be different agents. And with that, you're going to see changes. So you started to see right now two things happening in mobile. Different class of devices, like smart glasses and pendants and pens and jewelry, those new category of devices that go alongside your smartphone. And you can start on one thing and then another thing. But the other thing you're going to see is the evolution of agents. Like this whole episode of OpenClaw, every phone company now is talking about their claw for the device, the ones they can install, etc. And it's very interesting. Last earnings call, before OpenClaw, before this thing became popular, we talk about it, this phone that it just got launched in China from ByteDance. And you basically tell the phone what you want, and the phone goes to your apps and start doing things for you. And that's going to be a different way that you're going to use phone. So I think, very long answer to your question, but ecosystem's going to change, and we'll see what the winners and the losers are.
You're also involved in 6G. And that's also about AI, right? What does 6G need to do to sort of enable AI?
So I'm going to tie to this conversation we just had. 6G is going to be one of the biggest changes, I think, in the wireless industry, because it's been designed for this new future of AI-capable devices. So 6G, the first thing 6G is going to do, it will be the technology on the radio communication designed for see what I see. So all of us, right, with our future smart glasses are going to be like walking cameras. And for that, I need the technology that's going to generate a very high speed. Think about 5G was a technology that enabled us to watch high definition video streaming to you. Now there's going to be a lot of data that you're going to stream to the cloud. You and I are going to have smart glasses, and everything we see, you're going to get streamed to the cloud. We're all going to be walking cameras. The second part of 5G is actually the most exciting part of 6G. Yeah. The most exciting part, not a lot of people understand it. But because of AI, every RF signal that they transmit between the base station to your phone and vice versa, all of that, you can treat that as physical AI. All of this RF environment, we're going to treat as physical AI. And now,
that means robots.
No, that means it's like a sensor data. You're not training a model on language. You're training a model on the radio frequencies. And what you do with a physical AI, now you can develop completely new capabilities of this network. For example, it's going to be radar at scale. So one thing, I think it's probably very timely having this conversation right now. One of the things you do, the network, you do drone detection. Everything that is flying, the entire aerial economy, you're going to be able to do air traffic control at scale. You detect everything that moves. You go to every road, you see every bus, every car, every pedestrian, everything's going to be used for autonomous driving. You're going to be able to have sensing that you create a digital twin of the whole country. And that creates a whole new set of services. Not only context for those new mobile devices that are enabled by AI, but also you have now sensing capabilities coming from the telecom infrastructure, which is going to enable a bunch of different things. And my last comment is, this is the new data that is going to be important to train models. When we talk about winning the AI race, we talk about training models with the data that's available today on the internet. But think about the data when you and I walking around and everything we see, it's now data. All of this thing that happened on the world as data, that's going to be the next frontier of training models. So exciting stuff happening in technology, I would say.
So you're past the ARM litigation now. You can move forward with these Orion cores. You're now going to do CPUs and accelerators for in AI data centers. So you're going up against among others NVIDIA. Why are companies hyperscalers going to want to buy Qualcomm over NVIDIA?
Look, we're just starting with this, and I think we kind of schedule towards the end of June. I think that's where we're going to provide details on what we're doing. But I think we're doing something exciting. I'll give you the answer. I think, first of all, it's a very big market, and I think you're going to have a bunch of need for computers. There's opportunity for a lot of new players. But also, you're moving from what used to be one engine, processing engine, like the GPU that does everything, into very dedicated and specialized computing. We've seen this movie before. Actually, when you think about the smartphone is the most disaggregated computing ever. You have dedicated engines to do different things because you have to save battery life. Your battery has to last all day, no matter how much computing you have. So I think the data center is going to be like that. You have as you started to move to inference, and you started to actually put AI to production, you're going to need to have different type of solutions, especially for energy. This is the compute needs, this is the energy availability. That creates an opportunity for Qualcomm. I think we're coming from the phone side. All of our chips are designed assuming there's going to be a battery, which means we have to be very efficient in power. So it creates opportunity, I think, for a new type of architecture, and we're excited. It's a very big addressable market. I think there's opportunity for everyone.
Okay, so you're coming for NVIDIA on the energy side.
Oh, we're coming for inference, and we have kind of a different architecture, I think, for the post-GPU architecture for inference, and we think there's an opportunity there.
So I want to talk about, you've the memory shortage. You've actually said that the smartphone industry is going to be limited by memory availability. I'm just thinking about the supply chain in general. Do you sort of accept that this is just a reality of the current market, that there's so much demand? Or do you think there's something that fundamentally has to change when it comes to the supply chain?
That's a loaded question. And I think supply chain in general, I think you'll have manufacturing of chips, but you also have memory. Let's just focus on memory, which is the issue of right now. I think what happened is you have this massive amount of demand for compute. And especially you see on the data center because of AI. So you have a mismatch on the total demand and what's available for memory. That created an industry shortage. There's not enough capacity to build memory everywhere. And as a result, some of those memories get prioritized for the data center. Some other industries are now dealing with the impact. Like the phone market, it's smaller, just not because there's no demand. Actually, we're seeing in the beginning of the year, the demand is very high. You look at the success of a lot of the premium smartphones, whether the iPhone or on the Android side, but just there's not going to be not enough phones for everybody because of memory. That is causing a temporary constraint. As people build more capacity, this is going to go away. But there are other things that I believe is going to change. I think innovation usually happens when you have necessity, I think. And then you have a situation right now for completely new architectures that are going to be more memory efficient. You saw what Google announced with some algorithms to make models smaller. There's some of the things we're doing, and I think that is going to probably improve the situation. So I'm optimistic by 27 we have a little bit of a better position in memory, but we'll see.
2027, okay. So, all right, final question, running out of time. You compare yourself in this industry, Qualcomm, to being a gladiator. It's kill or be killed in this industry. So who's the next gladiator that you're fighting against? Who do you see out there?
Well, the way I use this metaphor, and I use that internally a lot. I think I tell folks, and there's a reason for that, which is if you think about how we started this conversation today, right? If you look at the mobile industry from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, and now 6G coming, you see great companies that went from hero to zero, right? You look, I think you remember BlackBerry, you remember Nokia and all of this. We're very fortunate that we've been there since the beginning and we survive. We be able to navigate to all of this. But I think what we learned through this process, the company has to always reinvent itself. I think that's what we're doing right now. So we use this metaphor because like a gladiator, you go to the Coliseum, you have one of three outcomes. You're going to survive, you're not going to survive, or you're both not going to survive, right? So you have 33% probability of success. And if you survive, the only thing you get is to go to the Coliseum one more time. And so that means, I think, that's how I use this metaphor. I think companies, success today doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. You have to always reinvent yourself. The market changed, technology changed very fast. And go back to how we started this conversation. I think there's so many changes in the mobile industry, AI. Well, let's see what happens. Let's see, how the players are going to evolve and change.
All right, well, this gladiator fight is over. I'm going to let you go, but
okay.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome Todd Bowley of Eldridge Industries and Liz Hoffman of Semafor.
Todd, welcome.
Good to be here.
So you were back in the 90s, one of the first people to figure out that insurance was not in fact boring, but could be very interesting. It could be a really interesting way to fund a lot of investments. You did it at Guggenheim, you've done it now at Eldridge, which I think is about a $70 billion asset manager these days with a lot of insurance money. It's in media, it's in sports, it's in real estate. This is a bet that Wall Street broadly has caught up to, and that model has been copied all over the place. Curious kind of what you make of the evolution of that model, where you see the risks emerging. Why is people's life insurance the right way to fund a bunch of investments that run the gamut from pretty staid to further out the risk scale?
Well, it's great to be here, but the first thing, obviously, is that Warren Buffett started this a long time ago. And I think that when you're in the insurance business, you're set up to really be able to go from point to point, right? So when you're a bank model and your funding is short-term deposits, I think that can change very quickly. But if you're an insurance company, and there's more 100-year-old insurance companies in the US than any other industry, which is a real testament to the business model. And Security Benefit was founded in 1892, $11, 11 people each chipped in $1. First insurance company to offer life insurance to women. And so, a cutting edge insurance company a long time ago. And now we're looking at the world where it's becoming more competitive. Like everything, in order to generate rates of return, you can't sit back and watch the bonds come into your inbox. You have to figure out how to go out and create them. And so I think that's been a model that we've been on for a very long time, over 15 years now. And when we started at Guggenheim, our largest shareholder was an insurance company, so they became our largest client as well. And we started to realize that you have this funding advantage. And you also don't have the same leverage in the system, right? So banks run, they did run, kind of 30 times assets to equity. At Security Benefit, we run roughly 6 times asset to equity. And that gives us a really broad mandate to be able to move up and down in the capital structure, and find compelling investments. Because I think if you're, a typical insurance company, would look at the world and say, we're 50% investment grade corporate bonds. And of course, what's happened is investment grade corporate bonds are now, trading at, 80 basis points over the Treasury index.
You're not getting paid a lot for that risk.
No, I just don't think so. I think, if you go back from 12/31/2014 till the end of 2024, and you look at various rates of return, and you go to Bloomberg and you say, kind of Bloomberg US Treasury equal weight go, the cumulative rate of return over that 10-year period owning US government equal weight risk, was less than 9% cumulative. So when you think about running a business and you're trying to cover your cost, cover your insurance policies, and if you're buying Treasury bonds, which are risk-free, supposedly, but loaded with interest rate risk, right, then you end up not being able to cover all your obligations. So it's a sure way to go broke over a long period of time, in my opinion. You look at the same thing with the U.S. investment grade, Treasury, the U.S. investment grade corporate bonds. They returned, I think it was roughly 28% over that same 10-year holding period, so sub 3% a year. You go to the Credit Suisse, now the UBS High Yield Bond Index, and it was closer to 63% over that same period of time. So obviously high yield bonds are perceived to be more risky than treasuries, yet they're actually generating a rate of return over this period of time. So those are all fixed rate instruments. And then if you go to Credit Suisse Leveraged Loan Index, which generally the loan index is senior secured and it's sits on top of the capital structure relative to the bonds, no interest rate risk because they're all floating rate. That was like a 66% cumulative rate of return. And then when you go to the JP Morgan BBB CLO index, over that same period, it was closer to 90%. So you have packaged CLOs that are kind of risky, so to speak, but they've got equity in the structure, so it's less risky than buying the loans outright, but you might have more liquidity risk, but the reality is you have much more return. And by having an insurance company that can fund for point to point, because I think MassMutual still has investors that started with them in 1925 or 26, so really long duration profiles. Because you have such long duration profiles, it allows you to think longer term.
But the flip side is we don't like it when banks fail, but it happens occasionally and there's a process for that. Insurance companies really can't fail. And I'm curious whether you think that this generation of mostly people who come at it from the asset management deal-making side have decided to get into the business of originating guarantees, whether they have their eye on the ball on risk. You say you bought Security Benefit in 2010, I think because it had gone bankrupt, because it had bought a bunch of bad assets.
It didn't go bankrupt. Insurance companies go into rehab, right? They don't go bankrupt. So they're it's a whole different regime.
But that's why you own it, that it had gotten in trouble on the investment side, right?
Well, I mean, I think, again, they did two things, right? They did two things. They were based in Topeka, Kansas. They decided that they wanted to buy an asset management business called Ridex. And they were playing from Topeka, Kansas without really good advice, and they were $200 million over the cover bid. So they overpaid for Ridex. And then, of course, what happened is the world started to change, as the 2009, 2010 started to evolve. And they decided that they were going to pay for all of Ridex by pulling capital out of the insurance company. And so there was $1 billion of capital, roughly. Ridex cost $800 million. They convinced the regulators to let them pull $800 million out to buy Ridex. And then, of course, it was an asset management business that was levered to the stock market. Stock market started kind of going down. So, of course, then the value of the asset management business started going down. And they also had gone out and bought $300 million of AAA bonds that were backed by home equity loans. And to think about that for a second, right? But the reason I love CLOs is because all of the senior secured loans sit at the top of the capital structure. So if an LBO occurs and you pay 10 times for it and you finance it with 5 times, you're 50 cents LTV. As long as that company is worth 50 cents, you get your money back as a lender. It might not be a great ride, but it's generally, as long as the documents are reasonable, you'll be in a position to get most of your money back, if not all of it. And you end up in a situation where home equity loans, you're 90 cents deep, 95 cents deep, maybe even 100 cents deep behind a mortgage. So of course what happened in that period of time, home prices went down, those home equity loans got squeezed, and they ended up manufacturing AAA debt that was backed by home equity loans that were fully subordinated to all these mortgages. That ended up not playing out great.
But do you not think that there's some similar financial instrument that is floating around inside some of these insurance companies that looks like that on the surface and has the same problems underneath?
I don't think that people who understand credit risk would be thinking about how do I create AAA bonds that then are backed by fully subordinated home equity loans. So I don't think that that's the case. I don't think if you look at the kind of the credit profile of the owner operators of whether it's KKR or Apollo or Brookfield, I don't think they would think that that is a good risk to take. Even though you're getting paid a full 14 basis points more than a traditional AAA, 14 basis points is really a rounding error. So to chase that amount of juice, because that's what they were quote unquote cheap AAAs is what they were at that moment in time. And if you do your credit work, right, then you would come to the conclusion, if you've been around a little bit, that that's not a good credit profile to be owning. So I think that, I don't think, I'm sure there will be future mistakes that get made, but I think that mistake won't be made again.
What is the bull case and the bear case for private credit right now?
To me, there's no such thing as private credit, really. There's companies, and the companies make loans, or the companies borrow money by people who make them loans, and it really comes down to the company itself, right? Because if you think about capital structure, right, these are really derivatives of the value of the enterprise. So as long as the enterprise is worth more than the debt, right, then whether it's private credit, public credit, investment grade credit, it's going to be fine. Right, so this whole idea of what is private credit is a name that I'm sure that they wish they didn't brand it because it sounds.
Do you have suggestions?
Well, it sounds sexy when it's going great, and you can charge more for it because it's private, and then when it's not going great, it becomes spooky and it's private. So the same thing ends up being two sides of a single coin. But the reality is that in the end of the day, right, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now. Right, if you think about the risk profile of a BDC, right, what does a BDC look like?
These are sometimes publicly traded, sometimes not, but these are credit funds that are marketed to
and generally, the max they can be is 2 times debt, 1 part equity, right? So that's the max they can be, and they never run at the max. So let's just say they run 50-50, right? And let's say you're looking at a $5 billion private credit BDC, right? Now you've got 50 cents of leverage funding it, so you got $2.5 billion of debt and $2.5 billion of equity. That equity comes from the retail investors that are writing checks that are really looking for 10% rates of return on and income. They're looking for income, right? So let's just say that portfolio ends up having, right, what's extreme. If you go back and look at all the corporate credit history, like a 10% loss would be an extreme outcome for a year. Right, so because that means you probably had a 20% default rate, a 50-cent recovery, and you end up taking a 10-point loss. Well, if you're running 50 cents debt, 50 cents equity, that means you basically lost 2 years of income, right? So it's not like the world's ending type of thing where banks that used to be 25, 30 times levered, right, and now they have a decent sized loss on a relative basis. That's not how these things are financed today.
You do a lot of private credit, but you don't have these retail vehicles, right?
I don't.
Had you thought about it at any point in the last couple of years? Because it looks smart now not to be in that space, but it was tough to sit out for a while.
Well, I think you have to think about it. Like we're in the laboratory right now thinking a lot about this, right, with our Eldridge Income Fund, where really what you want to be able to do, and of course it doesn't, you have to work within the framework of the SEC and everything. But really, if people knew that they had a price that they could get out, they probably wouldn't want to get out, right? So what happens is everyone gets hysterical and they all want to get out, right? And then they'll push on everything they can do to get out. So then you have these kind of this pressure to exit when the actual pressure is probably more extreme than the underlying results. And if you saw, David Solomon came out today at Goldman Sachs and he was basically saying, we don't see any real issues. Jamie Dimon in his latest report actually started to change, his perspective a little bit. Obviously, he had Trichlor, First Brands went down. Trichlor we looked at. Trichlor was basically a subprime finance company in Texas, right? So when you actually think, well, what's going on when you're financing a subprime company in Texas, right? Right now, the people who are taking those loans are probably more mindful of what's going to happen to them, within Texas, right? Then, are they ultimately going to have to go somewhere else versus being in Texas? The last thing they're worried about is their car loan right now. So of course, Tricolor was to us, an obvious one that was, not something that we were going to participate in. And we saw the same thing on First Brands, right? We didn't participate in First Brands. So I'm sure we'll get burnt, because when you're playing kind of in the markets, you always get burnt. But I think, the reality is those two were reasonably easy to spot.
One more very quickly, because we're almost over time. You invest a lot in media, which we in the media appreciate, but it's a challenge business. You own Rolling Stone, Billboard, Variety. You invested in A24, the studio. They're more profitable places to put your money?
A24 has been an absolute home run for us. I mean, we put $19 million in it in 2012. Today, it's worth over $4 billion. It was on my whiteboard when we started it. I think brands like Billboard, Hollywood Reporter, Rolling Stone, Variety, Golden Globes, South by Southwest, Billboard Music Awards, that's our kind of event plus our digital media business where we really have authority, right? The Billboard authority, the Hot 100 goes back in perpetuity. And we created another data company called Luminate on the back of it, which has been doing great. And we just got announced that CBS is now using our Luminate data versus Nielsen data. So we expect that to continue to grow. We're having a great year so far. So yeah, there's different elements of media that make it complex. But I think if you have the authoritative brands that stand for something, that have been around over 100 years, or you've got great convening power, which is what South by Southwest has, which we do for 2 weeks in Austin. We now do it in London. We're doing it in Sydney. We're going to take it around the world. We think that is a great brand to convene around. So the combination of authoritative brands with the live event business, we think is a really good combo. We also love the fact that A24 is probably, we get so much repeat business between directors, actors, and actresses. We have a whole A24 labs where we're using AI, but taking people down that AI journey, with us is really, I think, we're proving that, the people are comfortable with what we're trying to achieve.
Convenings, authoritative, live events, speaking our language. We'll have to pick your brain backstage. Thank you so much for coming.
Please welcome US Secretary of Energy Chris Wright and Semafor's Shelby Talcott.
Thank you so much for joining us, Secretary Wright. This is your second time here, actually, so we're glad to have you back. I want to start with a topic that you've been really focused on, which is nuclear power. The president has this goal of quadrupling nuclear capacity by 2050. You've seemed pretty confident that the US can reach that. There's been concerns about how long it takes nuclear to be developed. Can nuclear really be developed fast enough to keep the US competitive with China in the AI data center race?
Well, President's aggressive, as we all know, but it's usually based on substance, and I think it is here as well. Before I get to the meteor question, let me say one of the things the President asked for was these test reactors. early last year, so 13, 14 months ago, he said, we want to get 2 of these new reactors critical, meaning their full nuclear systems running by July 4 of this year, the nation's 250th anniversary. There's not much happening in nuclear for a few decades. To want to get something done in 18 months, that's aggressive. But through the DOE, with our regulatory authorities, we are moving through. We had 11 reactors apply to be part of this program. And I think we will not only have 2, but probably more than 2 of these next generation small modular reactors critical by July 4 this year. So the technology is moving fast. The private capital is fast. Bigger reactors take longer time. So it's an aggressive goal. But I think there's a very real chance that we'll hit it, and there's no doubt we will have a massive, massive expansion in nuclear energy production in the United States in the coming years and certainly in the coming decades.
There's been some growing pushback against the huge amount of power that these data centers demand on the local and state level. Could that slow down the president's goal of achieving this, quadrupling nuclear capacity by 2050?
No, because I think it's grown the constituency that wants more power, that wants to expand the capacity of our grid. During the Biden administration, in those 4 years, they closed 50, 60 gigawatts of firm, not at retirement age, generating capacity. And we saw the result of that, was no growth in American electricity and much higher prices. So people today, of course, want lower prices, which means more supply. We also want to lead in AI. So we've just got to bring common sense back to electricity, which is to get more out of the assets we have and build new assets as quickly as we can. So we're uprating nuclear reactors, we're uprating natural gas reactors, we're uprating hydro reactors, meaning taking existing reactors and adding to it. But no, this desire for more electricity generation, I think, is actually a tailwind for nuclear. You're probably implying funding for them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they're not going to, the original ones will not be funded through the traditional utility model. That just hasn't worked for a while.
What are you thinking of in terms of how that will be funded?
So a lot of that will be funded by the hyperscalers. They want to add data center capacity quickly. They have awesome balance sheets and massive amounts of capital. They're willing to lean in and invest in new generation. So they're going to be equity capital for probably most of the nuclear that gets built. And then the Energy Dominance Financing Office in the DOE. We have actually enormous lending authority, but a small credit subsidy, which means we have to lend smartly. We have to lend where we're going to get paid back. But are we going to get paid back by hyperscalers and developing large-scale assets? Yes, we are. So the capital is there to get it going. And I'm sure you know about the Ratepayer Protection Pledge. So we've tried to wed 2 things together. We need massively more electric generating capacity for the U.S. to lead in AI, which I think is incredibly exciting. There's massive upsides in that. And frankly, there's massive downsides of not leading in AI. But through the Ratepayer Protection Pledge, we've got agreements with all of the developers of data centers that they'll put capital up front, they'll pay for the power demand they need, and they'll pay for additional things that'll strengthen the grid. Many of the deals we've struck have 2, 3, 4-year freezing of electricity rates in nominal terms, which means a slow decline in real terms. And in Indiana recently, we've got a utility there applying for a rate decrease. So I actually think data centers and this new demand, and new supply being put on the grid, those are going to be forces to push down the price of electricity, not drive it up.
Speaking of lowering prices, I want to talk a little bit about gas prices. And I know you've talked a lot about this recently. But the president said yesterday that high oil and gas prices could be here to stay or could even be a little higher by the midterms in November. You've sounded more optimistic in past interviews, saying you expect gas prices to ease and that there's a good chance that prices could hit under $3 a gallon by this summer. Is that still your belief, particularly given today's blockade in the Strait, or has the dynamic changed there?
Well, by the summer is aggressive time frame now. Going into this is a 47-year-long conflict with Iran that's repeatedly not only been a threat to American soldiers and peace in the Middle East, but also a threat to energy supplies. The Arabian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz have been important my whole lifetime. And so The president knew going into this that if you disrupt the flow of energy through that, in the short term, you're going to push up energy prices. In fact, I'm very proud of a president who in his first term and his second term has done everything he can to grow supply and therefore push down the price of energy, that he was willing to say, I'm not going to kick that can down the road as other administrations have. I'm not going to let Iran become nuclear armed with a massive weapons missile stockpile so that they can never be defanged. We just have to live with this massive energy overhang in the Middle East that got worse. He knew it was short-term disruptive, but he felt committed to end this threat that Iran is about to cross this threshold. So, I'm proud of that, but it does mean higher energy prices in the short term. It absolutely does.
So what does short term mean now? Because you just said that by the summer might be ambitious. So what is your thinking on when Americans can expect lower prices? And I'm talking about lower prices in the extent of where they were before this war started.
Yeah, well, in the very long term, definitely this will reset prices down. But we're going to see energy prices, high and maybe even rising until we get the ships, meaningful ship traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. That'll probably hit the peak oil price at that time. That's probably sometime in the next few weeks.
So you think it'll go higher before it goes lower?
It depends how the conflict goes, but it's a very real possibility. But once the conflict ends and energy starts flowing again, you'll start to see downward pressure, but it will take some time. Depending upon the longer the conflict goes, the longer the rebound is.
And you mentioned that the president was well aware of the potential for these prices to go up in the short term. He said that as well. Did you talk to the president and your colleagues about sort of these projections or warnings that in particular the closure of the Strait of Hormuz could have on American gas prices?
Oh, you bet. We've talked about the problem of Iran and how best to deal with that problem since the start of this administration. It has been a constant, ongoing dialogue. It started with negotiations and pressure. He was very open to how do we resolve this problem, because it's not going to go away on its own. In fact, it's going to get much worse on its own. So very, very active dialogue, the whole administration.
What tools does the Trump administration have in its toolkit that you guys haven't used yet if this Iran issue continues to sort of lag on longer than maybe you originally anticipated? What more can the administration do to sort of make gas prices go lower sooner rather than later? Or is it entirely up to ending this war, fully reopening the strait, and this situation coming to a conclusion?
Now, there's a number of creative things, and a number of which we've already done. Obviously, releasing a coordinated release across the world from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We changed the blending requirements for gasoline production this summer. That meaningfully grows U.S. refineries' ability to grow the supply of gasoline. That'll have some downward pressure. We temporarily waived the Jones Acts to move energy around, because unfortunately we have a couple regions, California and New England stand out the most, that have sort of made themselves energy islands. So they're most at risk. Europe and Asia.
Are those the hardest to fix, in your view?
Yeah, they're the hardest to fix. And look, the president in his first term and this whole term, I was just in California. We have pleaded with California to say, you're needlessly imposing very expensive energy on the residents of California. And people tell me, well, it's a blue state. Well, we don't care if it's a red state or a blue state. We're here for all 342 million Americans. So everything we can do to lower energy prices, with or without the Iran conflict and across the country. But in this short-term conflict, the temporary waiver of the Jones Act is very helpful to make sure that because America produces more oil than we consume, more natural gas than we consume, and more refined products. Gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. So America is just by far the biggest energy player in the world. We want to continue to grow that production, keep energy prices down in our country, and of course help our allies abroad.
I also want to talk about Venezuela a little bit, because I've been bugging DOE on this for months, particularly before the Iran war began. I'm curious if you can give us an update on how many barrels of Venezuela oil have been sold since January, and I'm not talking about marketed, fully sold.
Fully sold. All right, so when the January 3rd actions took place, Venezuelan oil production was a little less than 1 million barrels a day. Call it, 950,000 barrels a day. Today, it's over 1.2 million barrels a day. So we've had about 25% growth in oil production in Venezuela in just over 3 months. And essentially, all of those barrels come to the marketplace. So if you say 95 days, a little over 1 million barrels, that's 90 to 100 million barrels right there. There was a buildup of storage of about 50 million barrels of excess oil that was on these blockaded tankers and that was stored on shore that they couldn't get to market. So in round numbers, probably 150 million barrels of Venezuelan oil have been sold. Probably a little more than that, but something like that since January 3rd.
And you've talked a lot also about getting U.S. companies to commit to investments in Venezuela. I'm curious how that push has been going. Are there companies that have agreed to do business in Venezuela that weren't doing that beforehand?
In fact, there's 5 American companies in Venezuela right now as we speak, down there with our Assistant Secretary for Hydrocarbon Energy and Geothermal Energy is down there with them right now. And they're different kinds, from offshore producers to onshore unconventional to onshore conventional producers. But yeah, the interest is quite large. You will see new American investment flowing in this year. And you've also probably seen, in fact, I think there'll be an announcement very soon of the large American company that's been there for a long time is ramping up their production. They're doing land swaps to be more efficient in generating production.
You can name that company if you want. Feel free to.
I think everyone knows who it is, but I probably should be careful. But they've been there for over 100 years. And they are the largest producer of oil in Venezuela, and they are ramping up their production meaningfully, and they're investing in the country for the long term to grow it quite a bit.
What's the biggest issue when you talk to U.S. companies that they have? What's the biggest concern that they have in investing in Venezuela, and how is the administration convincing companies to go in after all of this time?
So I should be careful that we're not convincing anyone. I'm not twisting arms or bending people, but oil and gas producers are capitalists, and they're by nature risk takers. We produce oil and gas in over 100 countries around the world of all different risk profiles. So the risk profile of Venezuela, is it the same as the US or Norway? No. But what everyone recognizes is it's meaningfully lower than the risk profile of Venezuela 6 months ago. And the trajectory looks like it's going to be meaningfully lower 6 months from now. So people look at trends in risk. There's declining risk and massive reserves on the ground. So that's a pretty fruitful environment for investment, which massively helps, of course, global oil supplies. That heavy crude, a lot of our refineries were built specifically for that crude. When most of the refineries were built in the United States, Venezuela was the #1 exporter of oil in the world. So there's just a natural match there. Of course, it's in the Western Hemisphere. It's a shorter ship route to get here. It's a country with a history of democracy and a lot of energy professionals from Venezuela. Most of the oil and gas companies in the United States have tons of Venezuelan employees of their companies. So it's a comfortable place, despite 25 years of authoritarian rule, that's got a lot of positives going for it.
How long do you anticipate the U.S. being as involved as it currently is in Venezuela? Or is the goal long-term to sort of wean away from Venezuela and allow them to eventually do all of this completely independent of the U.S. without oversight?
Absolutely. That's the goal. That's the goal. Look, we're dealing with the government that was in power before, the remnants of a not good authoritarian regime.
Is it an issue that the person who is leading Venezuela was part of that past regime?
I would say it's the whole government. Mm-hmm. But we've used our leverage over the finances in Venezuela and the control of the flow of Venezuela to drive improved behavior. But you're starting from a very low base. But the degree of corruption, the political prisoners have been released, the press has become freer, the business climate has changed dramatically. So things are going in the right direction. But look, Venezuela's got a long history of democracy. I think when you see a democratic transition to a new regime in Venezuela, then you'll see the U.S. role pull back. U.S. businesses will be involved. The U.S. government will be allied and supportive of that country. But I think we'll be out of the gear we're in right now.
What do you think the timeline for that is? Because I know that was a question when all of this began back in January that a lot of people had, which was essentially when will there be sort of a democratic election in Venezuela, and when will the U.S. not have to use so many of its resources to do the oversight that it's currently doing?
Yeah, and I should, on the latter point, we're actually, I wouldn't say using a huge amount of resources. You know, it's a small number of people. We've established a relationship and an agreement, and it's a win. When I was in Venezuela, and when I'll go back, Americans are enormously popular in Venezuela right now. You know, we're the liberators of this country. 75–80% of Venezuelans in a poll are pro-America and pro the transformation that's gone about. So, but most of the activity down there is businesses, private capital, private whatever. So we're not twisting any arms, we're not doing anything. But the short answer is I don't know. I hope it's during this administration, and I suspect it will be. But look, if you look at the main opposition leader down there who recently won the Nobel Prize, Maria Corina Machado, she was asked, like, how quickly could an election be held? And I think her estimate was it would, in the best case, it would take 9 or 10 months from a concerted effort to we're going to build voter rolls, we're going to establish the institutions to hold an election to get there. And right now, our central focus is not to build voter rolls, it's to get people paid, to get the currency stabilized, for people to have meals on their table, to get people out of prison, to have money flowing in. So we want to see Venezuela, a lot of the corruption shrunk. We want to see Venezuela moving in a very positive direction. Positive for Venezuela, positive for the U.S., positive for the Western Hemisphere. And that progress in that, I think, has been tremendous. And then the next step will be moving towards these institutions for democratic elections. So I hope and expect it'll be during the Trump administration.
Well, that's all the time we have. We're going to have you back next year to see what the update is on Venezuela. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending today's live journalism, and to our partner Infosys. We hope to see you again tomorrow morning starting at 9 a.m. here at the Conrad.